Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here, as always, to talk about stuff. This week on the show, going to be basically continuing a discussion we had last week. Last week we talked about Final Fantasy 15 in spoiler-free terms.
Yeah, sort of like the open world portion of that game.
Mm-hmm. And really gameplay systems and stuff, which I don't think we're going to follow up on too much this time. Maybe some, because definitely the second half plays with those gameplay mechanics in a lot of different ways. Yeah. So we can talk about that. But mostly this is going to be a discussion of sort of the story and our final reactions and things like that with spoilers. We have some other pieces of news and stuff to talk about, but I do want to do, because I'm sure there are some people who haven't finished Final Fantasy 15, might not listen, or haven't played it, might not listen to our full discussion.
Yeah.
So, again, I think you know some of our thoughts from last week, but we've both played a substantial amount more since then. So let's do the spoiler-free takes. Sean, now that you've finished the game, if you had to put it together, what were your thoughts?
Man, like, I have not felt so conflicted about a game since I played Metal Gear Solid 5, and I know, like, last time on the podcast, like, we talked a little bit about, like, some of the side quest stuff and some of the open world stuff, and maybe the thinness of the story reminded me of that early on, but then, like, the deeper I got into the game in terms of the split of the game of being, like, you have this very big open world section that is the beginning of the game, and then you have this very, like, pretty truncated, quick, linear series of chapters once you leave the open world that leads you through the story. And, like, it's something where I really love a lot of the gameplay systems. I love the open world. I like going around and being in that world and driving and listening to the music and fishing and hunting monsters and doing all that stuff. I love that stuff so much in this game. I love the setting. I love the characters on the face of it and all that stuff. But I think the story is really bad. Like, in a lot of different ways. I think it just doesn't function very well as a story. I think its priorities are in weird places as stories. I think they waste a number of their characters that had a lot of potential. One, Luna Freyna, I think they fucking ruined that character in a way that, like, really frustrated me. That they, like, I mean, spoilers of stuff that happens to that character, but they just waste her really early on, and I just came away very unsatisfied by the story, and then actually kind of, like, a little mad at the story for trying to pull some very, like, melodramatic, emotional moments at the end that I felt they did not earn at all. And so that stuff really turned me off, and then once I got back into the open world, I started doing more quest stuff, and I started having fun with that again. And so it's a game that I have a lot of conflicted feelings about. And so it's something where if you are fine with not caring that much about the story stuff, which in the scope of my playtime of the game, the story stuff is like 8 hours or something. Like, it's pretty small. Like, I can recommend this game on its open world stuff, but I don't want to give it a pass on some of the stuff it does with the story.
All right. I don't think we've been this split on a game in a long time.
I feel like this is going to be like if on the Metal Gear Solid 5 podcast, one of us had fallen on the other side of that game.
I guess so. I love this game. I love it very much. The thing is, I don't think I'm necessarily even going to disagree with you on certain aspects, but this game worked for me, and not just in the open world stuff that I think you and I agree on. The story worked for me, and I think it's got issues, and I wish some of those issues were worked out, and I can talk about those. But, man, I thought at its high points, this game worked me over to a degree that no other game has this year, and I found a lot of it in that second half very powerful. I really liked the linear half. I have very specific thoughts on why I think that works from a game design standpoint.
Sure.
And, yeah, I thought the closing hours were insanely powerful to me, and I really loved the end of this game. And I did go back. I've played a lot of this. I actually finished. I platinumed the game this morning. My platinum trophy. Took me about 60 hours total of gameplay time. So I have put the game back on my shelf. I'm done with it for now. Although I'm interested to see what they do with some of the DLC. But, yeah, I fucking love this game, and I'm curious to have a conversation about it. And, you know, it's a weird... I've been trying to think of how to quantify this. I think as with anything you love, it's kind of a warts and all thing.
Sure,
if you fall in love with something... I don't know. I love the overall package, and there are things that are so powerful to me, even if I think there are things that don't work entirely. By the end, so much of that had fallen away to me, and it worked very, very powerfully. So that is my thoughts. So yeah, we'll. And then the thing is, I was pretty close to the end last time anyway.
Yeah.
I was about 32 hours in, and I finished it about 34 hours, and you know, So really, I had one more night of play left, and that was the night that really, I really do like the ending to this game, and I like a lot of stuff near the end. So
I do not like. There's some stuff about the ending I kind of like. Another thing of my thoughts is also this game feels really unfinished to me in a number of ways. Like there are things that happen and places you go to where you're like, oh, there was going to be a level here, and there is not a level here anymore. Or it's there is going to be another phase of this boss fight. There isn't a phase of the second phase of this boss fight anymore. There's. I feel like every single step in the way in the second half of that game, it felt like when I played like Knights of the Old Republic 2 or something. You're like, oh, okay, I see what happened to this game.
Okay, I mean there are parts that I agree with that on, and parts that I don't. So we'll see. Let's go ahead and move into some news and topics and stuff. Speaking of games. One of my stuff things I have this week is about Call of Duty Infinite Warfare.
Yes, very good game.
But I haven't played it yet. So I ordered it from Amazon this week because they had the Legacy Edition, which has Modern Warfare in it, on sale for $50. So I thought, that's as good a price I'm
that's a good price.
So I bought that, and it was supposed to come like Thursday, and I thought maybe I could, put Final Fantasy aside for a little bit, play that, we could talk about it on the podcast and have an extra thing to talk about. Anyway, Amazon lost the package, which is like the second or third time that's happened to me in the last month.
That's literally never happened to me with Amazon.
And when I say lost, like it didn't completely disappear. That has happened to me with Amazon before. But it's just like the tracking, they're like, we don't know when it's coming. And like, if it hasn't arrived by this date, we'll give you your money back. So I was totally out in the cold of like, when is this thing coming? It finally came Saturday night. So I didn't have time to play it. So I thought I will finish Final Fantasy because I was still working towards my platinum. And I'm like, when I'm done with that, I'll put that aside and then I'll play Call of Duty. But I did really quickly open the package just to look at it. And I have to complain about something with this game just from a packaging standpoint.
Okay, yeah.
Why the bloody hell is Modern Warfare not on its own disc?
Oh, right, yeah. I don't know.
It's... Okay, so you get the game. It's one Blu-ray disc.
Yes.
And a Blu-ray disc can hold a maximum of 50 gigabytes.
That game that package is more than 50 gigabytes.
But if you turn the game around and look at the back panel of the game where it has the different, pieces of technical information, it says 130 gigabytes minimum. Yeah. Which means there are 80 gigabytes of this game that are not on the disc, which defeats the purpose of having a disc-based game.
To be fair, that's like a lot of that stuff I think is like for like DLC. Like that's like Infinite Warfare and Modern Warfare Remastered combined are not 135 gigabytes on my hard drive.
Okay.
Yeah, like I think it's around 80 gigabytes total of memory.
Okay. That's weird that it says that then. Because I did put in the code and started downloading Modern Warfare Remastered, and it's 48 gigabytes. At least maybe they've patched stuff in, I don't know.
Yeah.
But at this point it's 48 gigs. And that should just be a disc. Like that's big enough. Like that is the outer limits of what you can even fit on a Blu-ray. And it's just like, for me, that took like 24 hours to download. So it's like, that's why I buy discs a lot for PS4, is PS4 has pretty slow download speeds.
Yeah.
I don't have a fast internet at my house, so it's like, just put in the disc and play it. And then, so I put in Infinite Warfare earlier, and it started downloading a patch or something. I didn't see how big that was. But, yeah, so I'm glad to hear it's not a full 130.
No, yeah.
But it is weird that it says that on the package.
Yeah.
And that, that just should be a 2-disc game, and it feels like a real rip-off on some level. Like, you're still getting the game, Modern Warfare, that's fine. But just the fact that it's just a code and you need another 50 gigs to download, I don't know. I don't like that about it, and I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Because it also shows, boy, we are running up against the limits of what physical media can hold, unless they get into more of a mode of we can compress this shit.
Yeah.
And, so I just think that's funny.
Yeah, no, I completely forgot that didn't come on 2 discs, because in my mind, it is just 2 discs, because that's so obviously what it should be.
It would be like, I got BioShock the Collection, and that's 2 discs. And it would be like if you got BioShock the Collection, and it was 1 disc, and it just had BioShock 1, and you had to download 2 in Infinite.
Yeah, because it is something where, Modern Warfare Remastered is about the same size as Infinite Warfare.
And they're given, equal billing on the packaging.
Yeah.
It's half and half of that front cover, and obviously that's a big draw for people. So it's and you have to have the disc in if you're playing Modern Warfare.
Yeah.
Which is kind of extra weird because it's a code, so it's already tied to your account. That's all very strange to me.
Yeah.
It has its own icon on the PS4 homepage. So anyway, that has no bearing on the quality of the game. I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it. I'm actually very excited also to just jump back into Modern Warfare. And, I probably will play none of the Infinite Warfare multiplayer, but I will totally go play some Modern Warfare multiplayer.
Yeah, it is really fun to go back into those maps and run around and be like, oh yeah, I remember, camping in this corner and sniping people on this map and stuff like that.
Yeah, so anyway, I just thought the way they packaged it for you was very confusing.
Yeah.
But whatever, it happens. It's bizarre. Anyway, so that was one thing. Did you have any other video gaming stuff to talk about here?
No, all I've been doing is putting time into Final Fantasy 15 because that is like a more minor issue complaint with that game. But when you get into the post game stuff, I feel like the travel time starts weighing on me a little heavier. Of like, oh fuck, just let me take all these hunting missions. Like, just for the love of God, just let me do all of these because you've got like 8 of them, and I just want to get to the next hunter rank. Fuck it, just let me do all of them.
Luckily, there is no trophy associated with hunting, so I was able to abandon that pretty quickly.
Yeah, but the thing is that there's a bunch of, like, the higher-ranking hunter missions are all, if you look, they're all, like, unique monsters and stuff. Like,
Right.
the boss fight that should have been on the mountain is a hunter mission where you fight the rock of Ravatog. Like, I want to fight that thing, but I need to get on a higher hunter mission level to get it.
Yeah. That is definitely one of the cool things about that game is all the monsters and stuff. They knocked that part out of the park.
Yeah.
So anyway, I have one movie to talk about. And this is not a movie you have probably even heard of, but I wanted to mention it because the way it was presented was so fascinating, and I thought it would be of interest to people. So you might know, if you read my work or anything, Terrence Malick is one of my favorite directors. American director, made Days of Heaven and Badlands and The New World and The Tree of Life. Anyway, those are all movies he made. He had 2 films out this year. One called Knight of Cups, which has been several years in the making and finally came to the U.S. this year. But the other one is one that's been even longer in the making, called Voyage of Time, which is this documentary that, if you've seen the movie The Tree of Life, there's a portion in that film where it cuts away and does this like 15-minute tone poem about the creation of the universe and the origins of life on Earth. And Voyage of Time is something he's been working on since then, which is like an expanded feature version of that sequence. Not using like the same footage. It's different footage, but it's like the same kind of ideas and themes.
Right.
And it finally kind of started trickling out this year, and there are 3 versions of the film, which is super strange. There's a full feature-length, like 90-minute version.
Then there's the version that comes with Tree of Life Remastered.
Yes.
But that's a download. It's not on a disc, and it's really frustrating.
I do think it would be hilarious if he did like an extended cut of Tree of Life and just inserted fucking Voyage of Time in that part, and just like, okay, we're going to stop and watch a 90-minute movie.
It's like that like director's cut of Watchmen or whatever, where they put in the whole Black Voyage thing.
Yeah, the Tales of the Black Freighter or whatever.
That's it.
Yeah. Anyway, it would be like that. No, so there's a 90-minute version narrated by Cate Blanchett that has only played so far at the Toronto Film Festival. It's never come out anywhere else. And then the wide-ish released version was an IMAX version narrated by Brad Pitt that's called Voyage of Time, the IMAX Experience. And I was super annoyed because that movie came out in IMAX on my fucking birthday this year. And I was so excited to see it, and it opened in like 20 cities. And you know what city it didn't open in? Denver. Okay. Even though we have 2 real IMAX theaters, one of which is a museum, which would be like the perfect place to play this movie, and for some reason we didn't get it. And I was very pissed off about that back then, because it's pretty rare that we just get lapped completely by a movie in Denver. We're a film city. Like, we have film centers and societies and things like that. Quentin Tarantino shot his last fucking movie in Colorado. Yeah. So anyway, it's weird when we get lapped. But this week they announced that Terrence Malick had gone back and created yet a 3rd version of this documentary called Voyage of Time in ultra widescreen 3.6.
Okay, who did he get to narrate this one?
Nobody. This one stripped out the narration, so it's just, which is apparently what he always wanted. And he had to have narration in there for sort of commercial purposes on the other versions. So this one is just sound and music.
Okay.
But it's the same cut as the IMAX version, which is to say same shots, same shot length, same length of the film, about 45 minutes. But it's in ultra widescreen 3.6 to 1 aspect ratio.
Okay.
And this is what I thought people might find interesting. So that is the widest a movie has ever been produced at, to my knowledge. Sure. Because if you think of like the widest widescreen you might know of, which is Cinerama, which is what, for instance, The Hateful Eight was shot in, and that came out last year. So you can look at that, and that's the same frame. That is 2.76 to 1. Normal widescreen that you go see, like Star Wars, is in 2.35 to 1. This is in 3.6 to 1. So that is really fucking wide. And anyway, they opened it in 21 cities this weekend, and they were specifically bringing it to cities that it didn't come around to last time. So Denver finally got it. And sort of to add insult to injury, they played it on our IMAX. But we didn't get like the actual full IMAX version. But I was okay with that. So I went to see it. And this is how much I love Terrence Malick and how excited I was for this movie. They were only playing it at 10 p.m. at night.
that's
once a
very
day.
late, yeah.
It was on their IMAX, and even though it's a 40-minute movie, they charged full IMAX admission, which is $20.
Oh, Jesus.
So that is by far the most like dollar per minute I have ever paid for a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty pricey.
Yeah, but I was like, I might never get to see it if I don't do this. So
yeah,
I'm
and
like,
certainly you would never like see it in that way, you know?
right.
Yeah.
So anyway, and like the last time I caught a Terrence Malick movie in theaters at all was The Tree of Life in 2011. His next two movies I missed in theaters because they were out really briefly here, and I got them on Blu-ray. So anyway, it was cool to see it that way. But I was kind of worried before the movie starts because this was the Colorado Center IMAX, which is our biggest real IMAX here. And it's a really cool theater. If you've never been there, I can't recommend that auditorium highly enough. Except don't go in 3D because they give you super small glasses, and the 3D just blurs and you can't see the movie. At least if you also have to wear glasses. I don't know if that's true, but I don't have the option of taking those off because I can't see the movie anyway. So, but anyway, before the movie started, I was kind of sizing up the IMAX screen and trying to figure out how much of this screen is this going to take up? Because an IMAX screen is about 1.44 to 1, and we're talking 3.6 to 1.
Yeah.
So this is really wide on this really tall screen. But then the movie started, and I kind of stopped thinking about that. It's very natural, the way it played. Like, it's very wide, and it's wide enough that you cannot take it in just with your eyes. You have to move your head around a little bit and go back and forth. But like the framing felt very natural. It didn't look too thin on the screen, like where it looked weird. It just felt like, and every shot just felt like that's what it was framed for, right? Like that feels like it's supposed to be this wide. Like I actually think this is a version of the movie that you could really study in terms of photographic framing and composition because it's really well done. And I was reading some interviews, and apparently the whole way this came about is that when you watch an IMAX movie, of course you can't take in the whole thing. Yeah. It's a really tall frame. And so generally people's attention is brought to 1/3 of the frame at a time. And they were thinking, well, this new really wide aspect ratio is about 1/3 of that frame, so we could really concentrate it and draw your attention to different parts. And so I found it aesthetically just overwhelming. The sound is beautiful. Seeing it on that big IMAX screen, even though it's not filling the full thing, it was the perfect way to see that movie. And, beautiful IMAX projection and all that, and the sound. And just, I thought, that was literally, there's never been a movie in that aspect ratio. And so to see that was really cool and interesting. And I don't think it would work for any other type of movie. Like, this film is, as I said, it's about the creation of the universe, and and I'm saying it's about anything. It's like a tone poem. It is an avant-garde film.
Yeah.
And I should just say that because it was so bizarre going to a commercial IMAX to see basically an avant-garde short, but because it's IMAX, they were still contractually obligated to show trailers. So before this Terrence Malick movie, I saw a trailer for the new Transformers and like a Kong Skull Island and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, good trailers, but it's like really bizarre before this specific movie.
I'm sure Kong Skull Island would have made a great double feature for this film.
Indeed. They should show Voyage of Time as like the short before the movie. Yeah, no. Actually, I think I might try to go see Kong Skull Island on IMAX because that's the most I've enjoyed that trailer. It looked really
Sure,
cool
yeah, I bet
the
scale of Kong probably comes across really well.
It was really cool. Anyway, but back to Voyage of Time. So anyway, I just thought that aspect ratio was really neat. I even went home after the movie and watched one of the trailers on YouTube, which is in its normal aspect ratio. And I saw what they were going for, because you can see the space that they'd kind of cut out or elongated or whatever. And I'm like, I actually think framing it that tight, and it doesn't feel tight, but that tightly and really giving you that sense of space was smart. And what I was starting to say is, I don't think you could do this if you had a story like with human representation.
Sure.
That's actually one of the problems with widescreen in general. If you look at a movie that I don't think is shot very well in widescreen, human faces are vertical. They're not horizontal. And often that becomes claustrophobic, not intentionally, in widescreen if you're not careful about it.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you could really do this if you had like a story with people in it, because I don't know how you would frame that up in this kind of ultra widescreen.
It's just a lot of people's heads, and it's all you see is their head, because that's all that can fit in the frame.
And then a lot of empty space.
Yeah.
But like, just with these shots of nature and the cosmos and like a lot of fish and things like that underwater, it was fascinating and beautiful. And I really hope at some point they do a good DVD package of this with all 3 versions of the movie so you can compare them. I also want to see what the fuck this would look like on like a 16:9 television, because it would be mostly black space. But, man, in a theater, this was really cool. If you have a chance to see it and you like this sort of adventurous thing. And when I say avant-garde, it's not scary avant-garde like where someone cuts their dick off and feeds it to someone.
Sure, yeah.
It's like, beautiful, natural, tone poem avant-garde. And I think it's an outstanding film. I think at 45 minutes, it feels very abridged to me. I would love to see the long version. And I kind of wish they had just done the 90-minute version in this ratio for theaters, because it's like, or done something like play the movie twice or something. Because at 45 minutes, it is like,
especially for
more.
$20, you're just like, come on.
Well, especially because they were playing this on IMAX theaters. I actually thought it would have been cool if they had played it this way first and then done it again at the full IMAX ratio. Yeah. That would have been a really cool way to kind of compare and contrast. But they didn't do that, which is okay. Yeah. But I felt like, even though it was crazy pricey, I got my money's worth. And that's one of the films this year I was most excited to see because I'm weird. And I finally got to see it. And I just want to talk about that. And I like this era we're in, where directors are feeling like, fuck it, we're just going to play with aspect ratios.
Yeah, it's like that, and like directors playing around with frame rate and stuff like that. Like, that's just, it's encouraging to see that the technology of filmmaking has not just become completely static in the way that, like, I think it felt like maybe it was going to be for a while. It's like, well, we kind of decided on a number of these sort of standards, and we're just going to stick with it, even though we're, like, through practical reasons, we're not going to always use film stock in that kind of stuff all the time, and then the ways we project film are changing. It's like, I'm glad that they're sort of playing around, or some filmmakers are playing around with that technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another movie coming out that I'm very excited for called La La Land, which is this musical. It's going to win a boatload of Oscars and stuff. But that even was shot, it looks like, in about 2.55 to 1, which is not quite Cinerama, but it was an early form of CinemaScope. There's actually some Disney movies made in that aspect ratio. If you watch Sleeping Beauty or Lady and the Tramp, they were both made at that aspect ratio, which is fascinating for animation. So it's something that's in the water right now.
Yeah.
And it's cool, because I almost think like filmmakers are feeling like, especially as theaters just stop giving a shit about aspect ratios, it's like filmmakers are pushing back and being like, well, if that's the case, then we can do whatever we want. Like, we have a canvas, and it's like, it doesn't matter if the theater isn't built for it. We'll just do it, and it'll be cool. And I kind of like that. So anyway, that's neat. If you have the chance to see it, and if you want to stay up until 10 p.m. to go see a 45-minute movie. And the piece de resistance on this entire story is that there were about 10 other people in the theater with me, which was 10 more than I expected. Yeah. At the end, most of them looked confused. And I was outside just writing down some notes afterward, and a guy came up to me and was like, did they play the right movie? And I'm like, that's what I was there for. What were you there for? And he said, well, we were there for something else. But that wasn't it. But it was kind of cool, so we just sat there and watched it. And I'm like, okay. It's like, we're going to go talk to someone, though. I don't know what. Yeah. So it was like 10 people, and at least 2 of them were there by accident. So
it is, it's a specialist kind of movie. It is definitely the kind of movie that imagine, like, if someone just stumbled into the, like, is this even a movie? Is this someone's, like, screensaver? I don't know what's happening.
Indeed. So that was fun. So anyway, that takes care of our stuff. Let's go ahead and move on to some of the news. We've got some really fun news to talk about. Yeah. And why don't we just kick it off with the best thing from this past week, which is that Marvel dropped the trailer for Spider-Man Homecoming.
Fucking yes, they did.
That's a really good movie trailer.
It is a great movie trailer, and it's a even better Spider-Man movie trailer.
The best thing about this trailer to me, and there's so many things we can pick apart, is it looks so different than any other Spider-Man movie. Mm-hmm. Because if you go back, like, we all, in the moment it felt like, oh man, Amazing Spider-Man, it's really different than the Sam Raimi movies. But if you really look at it holistically, that was them trying to do Sam Raimi Spider-Man. Yeah. And how it was marketed and everything, it was not drastically different. And I think you realize that when you watch this, and it's like, oh shit, this is like 100% different than what we've ever gotten with Spider-Man on the big screen. And for a hero, like, you can't say that with, like, Batman.
Yeah.
Like, because even if the Chris Nolan movies are very different, they're not so different from the Tim Burton movies that you have to say, like, that looks like a different character.
Yeah.
This Peter Parker looks like a fundamentally different Peter Parker than Tobey Maguire, and I love that those two can coexist in cinema.
Yeah. It just feels like watching that. It's kind of everything they've done with how they've treated Spider-Man when we saw him in Civil War and casting him and all that kind of stuff, is that it is Marvel comic book Spider-Man on screen the way they've, like, translated Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Guardians, like all their other, Doctor Strange now, all these characters, is they have taken this very back-to-basics approach, looked at the roots of the character, like what was popular about the character, what made the character work in the comic books, and then updating that and translating that for film. And that has been so successful so far, is that even people who have issues with some of the Marvel movies, and there are issues to have with like villains and stuff like that, even if I don't have a huge problem with them. I think everyone agrees that they nail the main character every single time, and the hero characters in their movies are iconic and interesting and developed and diverse and awesome. And as a huge Marvel Comics fan and as a massive Spider-Man fan in particular, having grown up reading the old Steve Ditko, Stan Lee Spider-Man comics, watching this on screen and seeing Peter Parker and Tony Stark together, and seeing Peter Parker in high school, in an actual high school setting, looking like a high school kid, talking to people that look like high school kids, and saying high school kid things about high school kids, and then having Peter Parker being awkward, and then Peter Parker having the suit that has the webbing under the arms, which is or the original Steve Ditko costume design had that. All that stuff just feels like, fucking, that's Spider-Man, man. That's just that character translated onto the screen for 2016. That's what I, as a Spider-Man fan, really want,
Yes. I mean, he's a kid in this trailer, and even though they paid lip service to that in the Sam Raimi and Mark Webb movies, where Tobey Maguire technically films scenes in a high school, but you never really believe that he's a high schooler.
Yeah, the saving grace of that was that was only the first act of the first movie, and then they moved him to college, and you're like, okay, I can buy him being a college student.
Yes, absolutely. That was fine. Andrew Garfield, where they did the things with the skateboarding and stuff, and it was so bad.
Yeah, it just felt like Mark Webb tried to make him a teenager from when Mark Webb was a teenager, not from the early 2010s.
I mean, here's the difference. Spider-Man Homecoming looks like a John Hughes movie made today.
Yeah.
Amazing Spider-Man felt like him trying to make a John Hughes movie in the 80s, but made today, and it felt way out of place, right?
Yeah.
Full on with the actor is 10 years older than the character. And, today that's not really how we do teenage characters, because there are teenage actors who can do that kind of thing. And, Tom Holland is a little older than Peter is in this, but he reads young and he looks young. And, just having him, in class being bored, that alone is kind of a powerful image, because while we've had Spider-Man on the screen, we've never had that kind of hero in a movie, or in a comic book movie like this. And that's cool. And then, talking about being in 2016, that's one of the other things I loved in this trailer that I think follows up on stuff from Civil War, where we talked about this when we reviewed Civil War, that one of the great things that movie did is that, Peter isn't living in, a full house or something like that.
Yeah, he's not living in the suburbs of Queens the way he was in the 60s.
Which he could do in the 60s economically. Someone with Peter's economics could not do that today.
Yeah.
And, Aunt May isn't 80. She's in her 50s, which makes sense.
Yes.
And things like that. And the other thing I love in this trailer that adds to that is that the school, one, it looks like a New York school. It looks like a school in Queens. And two, those are not just kids. They're, ethnically diverse kids in the way Queens would be.
Exactly.
And I think that's almost revolutionary for movies right now, because I think that's still one of the biggest hurdles we have to get over is mixed race casting. And having, you can have characters who are Latino and Asian and black and white all in a school together, and so much it's still movies that are we're either going to have an all-white cast or we're going to have an all-black cast or something like that. That's not what America looks like.
Yeah.
And so I really like that basically you go to that school in Queens in that trailer, and Peter's the only white kid there, at least that we see so far, and that feels right to me.
Yeah, it is it's something that it captures that sort of modern New York City feel of this. Is it's all these different kinds of people just sort of thrown together, but they're because they're all kids, that none of it feels awkward or forced, or they're trying to push a diversity angle. It's just it is diverse because it is diverse. That's the way New York City is. That's the way these kids are. That's the environment they've grown up in. It's not if you go back and read 60 Spider-Man comics, every single kid in that school was white, and I have no idea what the 60s in New York in that neighborhood would have been. I suspect it was not quite that, but...
Right.
Yeah.
So that's great. Another amazing Spider-Man comparison. I don't want to... It feels like picking on, I don't know, some kid at school who didn't, do very well.
Yeah.
But we do have to pick on it a little bit because the comparisons are inevitable. But one of them is that first Amazing Spider-Man tried and didn't do very well to do the Spidey voice of him making fun of the villains, and it basically just came off as Peter being a sociopath.
Yeah, he was just harassing people.
Yeah.
More than trying to make jokes.
Well, this trailer opens with a little scene where he's stopping a bank robbery and making fun of them. And that felt like Spider-Man plucked off the comic book page
Yeah.
or out of one of the animated series. It just felt perfect.
Yeah, it was the right kind of like it's a quip that's kind of funny. It's a little bit clever, but it's also like you get the sense of like it's not that funny, and it's like a little bit awkward in the way that it's supposed to be. In the way that like in the comic books it is, because he's an awkward teenager who's like being able to express himself through being Spider-Man.
And here's what makes it for me is that when he's done with that, he like leans over and goes, oh my god, that was intense. Because that's what he's masking with all of that, right? You know?
Exactly. It's something that it is a huge difference with the Amazing Spider-Man approach, which I will never understand how some people who call themselves Spider-Man fans were like, oh yeah, this is my Spider-Man because he's telling jokes. It's like, Spider-Man doesn't just tell jokes. It's like he tells jokes in a very specific way. And the way that they handled it in this trailer with that opening scene of the bank robbers dressed like Avengers, like I swear to God, watching that scene in the trailer, like I could see comic book panels with word bubbles in my mind of like, I've read so many Spider-Man comics that have this exact kind of scene in it, that have these exact kind of jokes, and it's like, it's so on point with the tone of it. Whereas like with Amazing Spider-Man, you know, the big one in that first Amazing Spider-Man movie is like the dude who I think was like stealing a car or something, and Spider-Man just like fucks with him for like 10 minutes or something. It's just like, dude, lay off! Like, holy shit!
I mean, to the point where Spider-Man breaks into the car himself to wait there to quip at the guy, which is not a very Spider-Man thing to do.
Yeah, and it's just like, it was like a weird, awkward, extended scene where like it very quickly pushed over to the territory of like, this is going to end with you just like shoving, like spraying webbing down his throat, like killing him, right? Like that's just where this goes. Or using like your like sticky hands to just rip his face off or something. You
Basically, what Jack Bauer would do if he had those powers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, that's actually a good segue because they have that little Avengers moment. Even though this movie is being released by Sony, technically, I love how much Marvel is just like rubbing their scent all over it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
they're marking their territory.
Even though it says Sony on that trailer, they are not going to let anybody forget this is a fucking Marvel movie.
Yeah.
And it starts with that Avengers stuff. Tony Stark is all over this trailer. And I was impressed by that because I assumed it was going to be a smaller kind of cameo thing.
Yeah.
But it looks like he's a main character in this movie, and like they've really thought out what that relationship is. And I think it looks like a really interesting arc for Peter, where Tony is showing up as this kind of father figure almost.
Yeah.
And they have this interesting relationship. I really love that they're going the distance with that.
Yeah, I love what the trailer sort of suggests the plot of the movie is. That I think is very smart. Of one, I'm so glad that it looks like they're obviously not just rehashing the origin story. I suspect there will be reference or maybe a flashback or something at some point just to establish that, like, yes, this Spider-Man has the Uncle Ben stuff, like that happened. I hope that they do that just because I want that like on the table of like just acknowledging that happened and that's like part of his origin story and it's the Spider-Man origin story, you know. But I like that the story approach they're going for is, you know, expanding off of his role in Civil War of this is like Spider-Man in his early days, he's still in high school, and before this, he was just kind of like almost like an urban legend of Peter Parker was like doing that on his off time, and he didn't have much of a costume, and he was just kind of like doing what he could. And then now, after getting the nice suit and meeting Tony Stark and doing all the Civil War stuff and becoming like nationally recognized because of the YouTube footage of the Civil War fight, that he's trying to kind of hit it big time as a hero in some ways, that it's like he wants to get out there, he wants to like really make a difference, and this is like his story of him butting up against his first supervillain, which is the Vulture, and like having to sort of prove himself as being a hero and not just a kid. And it looks like that's kind of the relationship he has with Tony Stark in the trailer, at least, is Tony like kind of keep him under his wing but also keep Peter like kind of down, and Peter was like, no, like I can do this, like I have this power, I have this responsibility, like I can stand up to this stuff and I can really make a difference. I can be like you guys, I can be in the Avengers.
Yeah, I love that you can see so many different like influences from Spider-Man history on this. Like I feel like I see a lot of the Spectacular Spider-Man TV show in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly in the ways that it's like feels modernized.
Yeah.
It feels a lot like how that show handled it.
That show also, its first villain is the Vulture.
Yeah,
not that matters, but that's just kind of funny. And then also like I haven't seen a lot of it, but I want to watch more of it. The Ultimate Spider-Man TV show.
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
pretty good. Like it's slow to start, but there's a lot of really good stuff in it. And that also has kind of a similar thing where Spider-Man is starting to make it big time, and then the Avengers come in. That one's it's Nick Fury that comes in, but it's like, all right, Peter, we're going to see if you can kind of go big time with this. And I kind of like that as a setup.
Yeah.
I don't think it works entirely in that show, at least in the early going, but I think it's an interesting idea. So I just like a lot of those different sides that you see here. And yeah, I think it's kind of interesting that Robert Downey Jr., it's looking like he probably will never do another solo Iron Man film, but he's content to just show up in other people's movies.
Yeah.
And weirdly, it's bringing out new sides of Tony Stark. Not weirdly, but like I think we're seeing more of that character than we would have gotten if we just kept doing solo movies.
Yeah, because he can, as being a supporting character, he can occupy a different role of like having this like father figure thing is not a plot I would ever expect a mainline Iron Man movie to have tried to tackle, but it does put him in a different light. And it's something like in particular, you know, they have such a great chemistry, and we know that from Civil War, but like one of the moments in the trailer that just like I watched this trailer like 3 times in a row because
really good.
I've a fucking, you know, that's the guy I am. But it's like every single time I got to the scene where Robert Downey Jr. reaches over Peter Parker to like go open the door, but Peter thinks it's a hug and hugs him. He's like, no, this isn't a hug. I'm just opening the door for you. Like that is such a fucking pitch perfect scene of their relationship and of Peter Parker being this like awkward social teenager person and like fucking Tony Stark not giving a fuck, like because you know that Tony used to be that awkward social guy and then now he's like moved to where he can be just eccentric and weird and fun, and it's like I like seeing that dynamic.
It's great. Yeah, I love all of that, and I love that Robert Downey Jr. is willing to do this with the character because it's like, you know, can you imagine? I mean, this was a real problem with the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, is that when the main cast left, they just decided, all right, Johnny Depp will be the main character all the time. Could you imagine Johnny Depp going like, I'll just step aside and keep being a supporting character?
Yeah.
He would never do that, even though it would be better for the movies. I love that Robert Downey Jr. is willing to say, yeah, I don't need to be the main character in this movie. I can give this performance and do good work. And that's a really cool, and I know he's getting paid tens of millions of dollars. It's still a cool thing.
Yeah, because you would expect there to be a bigger ego thing in there of like, no, like, have me be top billing, like, give me all my own movies and all that kind of stuff. And it does feel like, you know, while he's prominent in these trailers, like, you'd still get the sense of, like, he's very clearly, like, a supporting character in Spider-Man's movie, not the other way around.
And, you know, I think it speaks clearly to how he and I think a lot of the other actors in the MCU, I think, relish this as an acting opportunity because they get to create these big characters and explore them from all these different angles. And I think that's probably really fun for an actor. And you get paid tens of millions. It's kind of the best of both worlds. And
then everyone loves you, and like you get to go, like, you know, like children will run up to you in the street, and like it's Iron Man. Like I can only imagine that has got to be like the most satisfying feeling in the world to like basically be a superhero in real life to a bunch of people. Like that's got to feel pretty good.
Indeed. So this looks so cool. We get one short glimpse of Michael Keaton in this. We see the Vulture quite a few times, but we only get one shot of Michael Keaton like out of the suit. So can't really judge that yet, but I just love that Michael Keaton is in this.
It's like it's such a great actor to get as a villain in a Marvel movie. It is like you do get like that one shot of him, but it's like you see that shot, it's like okay, like fucking awesome. I'm excited for that.
It's awesome, and it's just a great, you know, piece of like superhero history, having him come full circle and do this. I love that Michael Keaton is willing to do this because, you know, one of his last big movies was Birdman, which is very much kind of mocking the whole idea of the superhero thing. But I love that he was able to turn around and be like,
okay, sure, I played Birdman, now I'll play the Birdman. Like
I played Batman, Birdman, Vulture. Sure. He's got, like, maybe it's just a joke that he finds
it's just
funny.
like winged animals, like, that's my thing now. You know, this is my whole role.
Maybe if they ever do Hawkeye in the DC movies, he'll go back over there.
Or they do, like, the Hanna-Barbera Birdman cartoon as a movie.
He can do the voice.
Yeah, Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, the film, like, the live-action feature film.
I can imagine that being turned into, like, a real Oscar contender with, like, Michael Keaton in that. Anyway, so this movie looks great. Yeah.
Then, like, the one last thing on the trailer is I love... It's a reference to, like the classic, but my favorite Spider-Man trope of Spider-Man having to use his power to just overcome an intense physical obstacle. And it's immortalized on film in the Spider-Man 2 train sequence. And then now they ended this trailer with him doing that with the boat and holding it together with the webbing.
Yeah, always good.
It's just like it felt like this whole trailer was designed to just be like, hey, Sean, we're making the Spider-Man movie you want, and like every single shot is just like another thing of I want in my Spider-Man movie, and then it like ends with, oh yeah, and we're doing the fucking dope Spider-Man thing too, with him like trying to like save all these people from like this big disaster. It's like, okay, yeah, I was already going to see the movie, but I am insanely excited to see this movie now.
It's gonna be great. I mean, God, next year with Marvel, we have Thor Ragnarok, we have Spider-Man Homecoming, and we have Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Yeah.
That's going to be a real good year.
Yeah, that is a hell of a lineup.
Yeah, so very excited. Also love the choice of music in this trailer. It's the MGMT song Kids, I think. But anyway, it's a great song that I feel is like criminally underused in things like this because it's just so good for that kind of mood.
It's kind of like when we watched the Logan trailer, you're like, how is this song not used in every trailer for this kind of movie? It's such a perfect song for this kind of movie.
It is. So, yeah, some good superhero trailers recently.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. And one more trailer that I wanted to talk about, just because I find this so fascinating. They released the first trailer for the new Planet of the Apes movie, which is a War for the Planet of the Apes. And you haven't seen these yet, right?
No.
You really should. The new Planet of the Apes movies are so good, and they're so weird because they lean hard into the silliness of this story of the apes are building societies and they've got guns and the Andy Serkis character Caesar is learning to talk and things like that. So if you just take it on face value, they are ludicrous fucking movies, but they've done them with this seriousness and artistic passion to it that you never laugh at it, even though you kind of should. And I think Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the first one, was very good, had some issues. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is fantastic. It's got some issues near the end, but on a visual level and tonally, it's just so... It's kind of like a big art movie, but with CGI apes and stuff, and it's fascinating. And War for the Planet of the Apes is the same director who did the second one coming back, Matt Reeves, who's worked with J.J. Abrams on TV shows. He did the Cloverfield movie. He did the remake of Let the Right One In, which is criminally underrated. That's a really good remake. That if you haven't seen it, you should. It's really good.
My only problem with that was I started watching it and stopped after the first 15 minutes because I think I tried watching it too close after watching Let the Right One In for the first time.
Yeah.
And those movies, it is a very straight remake, at least at the beginning.
Yeah, it is, and but I also feel it's just so artistically made. It's so not the dumbed down version of that remake. So all I'm saying is maybe we don't need that movie, but it was really well made is all I'm saying. But anyway, this War for the Planet of the Apes trailer is really good, and I love that feel like they're leaning even harder into the super seriousness of it, and being able to lean into that while also not dumbing down that this is apes wielding machine guns and shit and riding horses. Being able to do both of those things is this crazy magic trick, and this movie, I don't know, it just looks really cool, visually and everything, and the ape CGI is still pretty much the best use of special effects I've ever seen in a movie in terms of they're just so convincing. And Andy Serkis is full on monologuing in this, so Caesar has fully learned to talk. I think he only said one sentence in the first movie. He talked 4 times in the second, and now he's giving full monologues. And then this also has a really badass use of Woody Harrelson, where he's the leader of the human resistance.
Was he in the second one?
No.
Okay.
Basically, the human cast is different every time.
Okay.
The apes are very much the main characters. That's the most amazing thing, is that the human characters are actually really forgettable in the first and second movies, and maybe they can fix that this time. But it's almost that's intentional because the apes are the main characters. Half of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is just done in sign language subtitled, because that's how the apes communicate.
Cool.
So stuff like that. So I just think this looks really neat. There's a pretty badass shot where Woody Harrelson is giving a big speech, and it cuts to him shaving his head as he's getting ready for battle. And I was like, I can dig this.
Sure, yeah.
And this is how good these movies are, that it ends with the ridiculous line, if we lose tonight, then this truly will become a Planet of the Apes.
They title drop in this fucking trailer?
They
Holy
do.
shit.
But this is why you have to see it and see the movies. It works. If you've seen the other ones and you stick through this trailer and look at what they're doing, aesthetically, when he says that, you should burst out laughing, and you don't. And that's a weird thing. So I just wanted to mention that, because I found, I don't think these movies... clearly they're very acclaimed and everything. I don't know if they're getting quite the attention they should for just how, I think, out there they've been going in trying to really rethink how you do this kind of summer blockbuster. And also, remaking Planet of the Apes, we know that can go very wrong.
Yes, it can. I have seen that movie.
So, yeah, these are cool, and I think that was a cool trailer, and I just wanted to mention it because I will totally watch Woody Harrelson and CGI ape Andy Serkis go toe-to-toe.
Sure, yeah. I did, like that. Those two movies are ones I've been meaning to get around to for a very long time because I love the original Planet of the Apes movies. Like, not even just the first one. Like, its sequels are silly, but they're my kind of silly. So, yeah, I'll get around to these at some point.
Yeah, they're the first two aren't perfect, but the second one is definitely better than the first, and I think if they follow that up, because this really looks like it's maybe not the last one they're going to make, but it's the big conclusion to this story arc. I think it could be really special.
Awesome.
So, yeah. One other piece of movie news. The trailer, as we're recording this, is not out yet for this. It's dropping tonight, so by the time you listen to this, it'll be out. But they announced they're going to release the trailer for the new Fast and Furious,
of course,
which
yeah.
up until now has just been called Fast 8.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that's just going to be the title of the movie,
But it's not. So when they announced they were doing the teaser, they announced the new title for this film.
Oh, what is the Fast and the Furious 8, right? Like, surely that's just what it is.
It's called The Fate of the Furious.
What?
Okay. Let's do the game where we try to name every Fast and Furious movie up to now.
Okay, I mean, this is good because have you seen all of them?
All but two.
Okay, because I have seen none of them.
Okay, can you do any of them?
It's The Fast and the Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious, Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift.
That was actually still The Fast
and the Furious Tokyo Drift. Okay. Then the fourth one is Rise of the Fast and the Furious.
The fourth one is just Fast and Furious.
Fast and Furious. Then it's Fast 5.
Yes.
Then it's Furious 6. Is that what that movie's actually called? Or is
It's
that
called
just in my head?
Fast and Furious 6, but in the movie it's called Furious 6.
Okay, so I think that counts.
Yeah.
Furious 6. And then now it's...
No, there's a seventh one.
The seventh?
It's called Furious 7.
What?
But in the movie, it's spelled out Furious S-E-V-E-N. So that's the difference there.
I can't believe I totally missed a whole one.
Yeah.
Furious. So this is the eighth
Yes.
one?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and this one's just called The Fate of the Furious with no number.
Furious. Okay.
And here's my favorite thing about this. Ever since the fifth movie, so 5, 6, 7, and now 8, every single one has been pitched in marketing as it's the last movie, and even builds up to a big final scene where it's they all get together and hug and it's the end of the film. Fast 5 ends with Dom and the other character, oh God, what's his name? The cop who the actor died.
Paul Walker's character.
Paul Walker's character. Yeah. They get in a car and they start to race again, and it cuts so you don't see the end of the race. And it feels like that's a good ending, right? And then Furious 6 ends with them all having a happy dinner together, and it's this was one last time we did what even that movie had on the title or on the poster was one last ride. And even though they had no intention of that being the end of the series.
Wait, so this means that this is the third movie they're making after Paul Walker has died?
No. First. Because Fury... Okay, so I'm not done. So Furious 7, that's the one where he died in production on Furious 7.
Okay.
So he died in production on that, so he's in the movie, but they had to do digital recreations and stuff.
Okay, so he's all in 6.
He's in 5, 6, and 7. He's in all of those.
Okay.
Yeah. But 7 ends with the farewell to that character.
Okay.
So that one also feels like it's the last movie. And now they're calling the 8th one The Fate of the Furious, which makes it sound like it's the last movie. And the tagline for this movie is All Roads Lead Here. So literally 4 films in a row they've marketed it as this is the end. And they have already greenlit 9, and Vin Diesel says they're going to make at least 10. So, there's no way this is the end, but they keep marketing them like they're the last movie.
All roads lead here. They've had it planned the entire time. Vin Diesel, the mastermind behind the franchise, has been maneuvering around directors and studios and writers to get his vision of this epic blockbuster action racing franchise of this 12-part series that he has been designing the entire time.
For which he was not even in 2 of the movies.
I mean, that was part of his original plan when he came up with this when he was 13.
Indeed. So I say this all lovingly. I love these movies. 5, 6, and 7 are so good. The first one I think is better than people remember, and the other ones are okay. But it's been so good for so long, and I'm very excited for this one. But I still think it's funny that they're once again going with the this is the last movie thing,
even though they have other movies already greenlit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they did before. 8 was actually supposed to come out. Or no, 7 was supposed to come out just 1 year after 6, and then of course it had to be delayed because of Paul Walker's death. So they've been on this track for a while. So anyway, But it looks good. I'm excited to see what the crazy trailer is going to be.
I just hope it's that like they somehow all get transported to like medieval fantasy times or something, and just it's basically like Fast and the Furious Army of Darkness. Like that's just what I want.
There's going to have to come a point where they have to go like super ludicrous with it,
like
right?
or like Jason X, like they go into space. Like they're like. There's only so many action car movies you can make that are just set in like contemporary Earth.
Because basically they did 5 was a heist movie. 6 was like a car action movie where like they had the car battles with this evil dude played by Bard the Bowman from The Hobbit, Luke Evans, and then the 7th one was like a revenge movie because the Jason Statham character was killing off their friend, so they had to go get him. But then it's like, well, what do you do with the 8th one? Do you like just go back to street racing, but now like someone has like some doodad that will destroy the world, and I don't know.
They have to take the one car to a mountain and cast it into the fires of this one volcano because the Dark Lord of automobiles, and who forged the car in the ancient times, is trying to get it back, and if he gets it, like the world will be destroyed. I think that's the plot of this one.
This one is directed by F. Gary Gray, who directed Straight Outta Compton. I think they should totally do at some point like a fucking rap musical Fast and Furious.
That just doesn't even have cars in it. Like, it's just all about rapping.
That would be great. Like, the Vin Diesel character decides he's got to get into the rapping scene.
I've got to get into the rapping scene.
So he, like, goes back to the streets of, I don't even know where they're from. I guess they're from L.A. That can work.
Sure, yeah.
And the bunch of white kids rapping, and Vin Diesel decides he's going to show them all up. And, like, he wears a bandana and tries to look 30 years younger. It would be great.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to this franchise running long enough that eventually they just straight up do a crossover into Guardians of the Galaxy and have Vin Diesel interact with Groot.
I mean, they're going to go to, like, at least 10 movies. This is, like, officially our James Bond. Like, this has become America's James Bond,
Sure.
And I kind of love it. Like, and they've even gone longer, though, with, like, the same cast. They will go to, like, 10 movies with fucking... I guess Vin Diesel wasn't in 2 and 3. But still, like, it's kind of an amazing thing that this specific series has gone on this long and has weirdly gotten better and better.
Yeah. So is this movie, or is the last movie the first one that is set after Tokyo Drift? Because it wasn't Tokyo Drift when it came out, it was set in the future.
Well, it wasn't when it came out. They decided
But there was
later,
like a character that dies or something in 3 that then is alive in the next movie, right?
Yeah, so the character that dies in 3, Han, is alive in 4, 5, and 6.
Okay.
Is killed in the, like, post-credits tag of 6. And then 7 starts, like, it intersects with Tokyo Drift, and that's where it picks up again. So yes, Tokyo Drift is like 4 films ahead in how they redid the lore. There's even a great nod to it at the end of 5, I think, where Han and his girlfriend, who's played by Wonder Woman, are driving off, and she says, "Are we going to go to Tokyo now?" And he says, "We'll get there, baby. We'll get there." It's great. So, and I hope they do something like where they bring Han back to life.
I just want them, after this, they just make Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift 2. Like, that's just what I want so much.
If you ain't out of control, you ain't in control.
Exactly. I mean, that it is the tagline, it is the credo that the franchise has been made by, both in the characters in the movies and the people making the movies.
I don't know how many times my brother and I have said that quote to each other while playing Forza Horizon 3 online.
Sure, yeah.
Because whenever you, like, spin out and you're, like, angry, you just say that, and then you laugh and you're happy again.
I feel like they made, like, a Fast and Furious DLC for, like, Forza Horizon 2 at some point.
They did.
It's like, man.
Anyway. All right, so that's movie stuff. That was fun. Let's talk about some video game stuff.
Okay, video game stuff.
2 pieces of Nintendo news. So, one of these is a report about the Nintendo Switch, but it's from Eurogamer, who broke the exact specifications of the Switch a year ahead of time.
Yeah, it seems pretty reliable to me.
I think we can trust them. And they're saying their sources are telling them that one of the first orders of business for the Switch when it launches is they're going to have a virtual console that will include, among other things, GameCube games.
Yeah.
And that's been something people have been asking for forever.
Yeah, it makes a huge amount of sense. Like, the console should be more than powerful enough to emulate GameCube games.
And GameCube games is the one holdout on the Wii U. You can play pretty much every other, across the Wii U or the 3DS, you can play pretty much every other Nintendo console other than, like, the Virtual Boy or like, Game & Watch cartridges. But they haven't had GameCube yet, and they're saying, like, they're going to launch with, Melee, Mario Sunshine, Luigi's Mansion, some of the big ones. They'll get more, going. And it's really cool. Like, for one, I love the idea of not only being able to play virtual console games, but specifically GameCube games on the go with the Switch.
Yeah.
That sounds really neat. And someone was pointing out, like, that will, if they really have Melee on there like day one, that's going to like revolutionize esports. Because Melee is still a big esports game, even though it's very hard to play in esports, things because you can only play it on a GameCube unless you're doing emulations, which kind of changes some specifications.
They're not going to do that.
So having it that way, that game is going to come back into prominence clearly, and it's cool. Because I love the new Smash Bros, but hey, I'll always play some Melee. It's a good game.
Fucking yeah.
So I love that. They're also saying that the plan is to have the other virtual consoles from the Wii U brought over with the same kind of thing they did Wii to Wii U, where they'll track which games you had, and either they'll give them to you for free or maybe $1 upgrade for each one. So that stuff will carry over, which I'm very glad to hear about because I have a pretty big virtual console library for the Wii U. It's probably my favorite thing about the Wii U is how it handles all of that is really good. So it seems like they're committed to building on that for the Switch, which I think is really smart because if anyone's got a catalog to leverage, it's Nintendo.
Yeah.
So that's cool, and I just love, GameCube has been like the holdout, and there's a lot that should come over. And, some of those games have been like remade, like Wind Waker, but some of them haven't, like Melee and Mario Sunshine and things like that. So there's a lot of cool stuff they could do.
Yeah, no, the GameCube has a really strong library of games, It's smart of them to keep that backwards compatibility stuff in the virtual console format, which is, a little different than just being able to put in a little tiny baby GameCube disc into your Switch and let it go. But
yep, as long as it has that startup sound, I'm good. That's the best thing. Yeah.
Man, the boot up animation on the GameCube is so good.
It's so good. I hope the Switch has something crazy like that.
Yeah.
That would be so good. But what it really indicates to me more than anything is that Nintendo is really committed to getting this thing out the door with a strong lineup, not just of new games, but just things on the device, like Virtual Console and GameCube, so that it's really compelling. And I love the idea of that.
Yeah.
Because the Wii U and the 3DS both launched very sparsely in terms of what you could play on there, and that was a problem.
Yeah.
So the Switch probably won't have that problem, and that's good.
Yeah, like if Nintendo just cannot get third-party people to make games on their system, they just have to put every single game they have on all of their systems, and that will be enough video games for a lot of people.
Oh, it's absolutely enough, so that'll be fun. One other piece of news, there was that interesting thing where they went on Jimmy Fallon, and Miyamoto was there, and so was Reggie, and they played the Switch a little bit, and that was cool just to see the Switch kind of in the wild, and you could see more sides of it.
Where you know that it's not like an edited trailer where they're like digitally adding the screen onto like a piece of cardboard or something.
Well, and that was the first time we'd seen specifically Breath of the Wild running live on a Switch, and it looked beautiful, so that's good to know. That was neat, kind of fun to see that. And then it was also neat to just see like the actual dimensions of the thing held in someone's hands.
Yeah, that's not like shot in such a way that you can't get a good reference point.
Right. So like it's clearly not, as felt as an iPad or something, but it looks compact and good. So that's nice. But they also showed off some things about Super Mario Run. That game looks surprisingly good, and I want to talk about that in a second. But the big news that's disappointing is Super Mario Run, which comes out next week, December 15th.
Right,
so I'm at least going to get it, and we can talk about it next week.
Now, I'll see what people say about it. If people really like it, I might pick it up too.
Well, it's free to start, so
sure, yeah, that's true.
You can just download it and see if you like it. But anyway, the one piece of news that's disconcerting about this is that it's an always online game.
Right,
you have to be connected to the internet to play this, and Nintendo does not know what the internet is. I'm just pretty sure at this point they don't know what it is, because it makes so little sense, especially for a mobile game, which the appeal of it is you can just play it when you're on the bus or something, or at home, or when you don't have cell phone coverage or something.
Yeah, or like on an airplane.
Yeah. And that's always been the appeal of like the DS and the 3DS and all that stuff, and even the Wii U. Like the Wii U is the system I play on Christmas Day when the PSN and Xbox have been hacked and are down.
Right.
So it's like that's one of the really nice things about Nintendo systems and games. And it's so bizarre that they would do this with Mario Run.
Like a game that on the face of it, in no way should demand an internet connection. Like I know there's some like online stuff that they do, but the core game does not need to be connected to the internet to function.
It's very much the problem I have with Hitman on the PS4 and Xbox One, which is that it has a lot of cool online functionality where they add stuff in and they give you objectives and all that. It doesn't have to be always online for that.
Yeah.
That's what I don't like, is that it could do that in between play sessions and whatnot, and you could build it in that way, and I'm sure they could do that with Mario Run, but they've decided it's just more convenient to have a blanket always online, and that is inconvenient. And look, I'm looking forward to this game. It's specifically something I am saving a like, I want to play this before I make my top 10.
Oh, okay.
Not because I think it's an outside chance, but this is technically a new Mario game. It looks to me like they've kind of cracked how to do this kind of game on a mobile device. And it's specifically like levels were designed by Miyamoto himself. Like, they got all the Mario people who have worked on games, in the past and in the last 10 years to come and just build levels for this. And journalists have played it and they say, it's really creative for this kind of thing. So I'm very excited to play it. That does make me a little sad of the always online thing is just, that's never a good phrase unless it's a game that has to be online.
Yeah, if it's like Destiny or World of Warcraft, it's like, well, yeah, fucking shit. Obviously, this game has to be connected to the internet.
Hearthstone.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of thing that I want on my phone so I can just play it whenever, not when I have specifically reliable coverage.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's too bad. I made a funny tweet about this where I just said, one day Nintendo will gain enlightenment and learn what the internet is, and we'll all look back at these dark times in disbelief. But for now, we are still living in the dark times. So
I do not necessarily have faith that they will ever figure it out. Like, I don't think that Nintendo's going away. I'm just looking forward to being like 70 years old and being like, oh, like, Jonathan, what's your friend code on Super Mario Brothers 5000? They brought these things back. Don't you love these?
Yeah, that would be the funniest fucking thing if at their Switch announcement in January they start with friend codes.
Yeah, that's like their Nintendo Direct. And it's like, and we've brought back a feature from our old consoles that we know diehard fans have been missing for a long time now. That's right. Say it with me, folks. Friend codes.
I'm pretty sure they would get lynched.
Yeah,
live on the internet. All right, so that's the news. Any other stuff with all of that you want to talk about?
No, the Switch keeps on looking better and better every time we see it. I'm getting pretty hopeful about that console.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful for that. I'm hopeful for Mario Run. I think it sounds cool. So, yeah, cool Nintendo stuff. Let's go ahead and talk about a very different game.
Yes. Yeah.
From just about any game. You can really say that in comparison to just about anything. Final Fantasy 15.
Yes, the old XV.
Yes, so from this point on, there'll be spoilers.
Yes.
Yeah, so we gave our overall thoughts early on. Hope this doesn't get too heated or anything. I respect your point of view.
Yeah.
Hopefully you respect my point of view.
We'll see once we get into this.
All right. Where do you want to start, Sean?
Oh, man. Let's start with like reiterating a bit of the structure of the game, because it is very unique and it's a bit strange. And it's something we talked about a little bit last week's podcast, because you were deep into the linear section, and you were talking about how it's easy to call it two halves. It is not actually two halves in terms of playtime, but it is the game is structured in chapters. And the first 8 chapters are all in this big open world, with chapter 3 literally just being called open world, which I kind of wish that that whole section was just chapter 3, and it was just called open world the whole time, because that would be kind of amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, so chapter 9 is when you go to Alticia, which is this city outside of Lucius. Specifically, the open world is the kingdom of Lucius, which is Noctis's kingdom, and then you go into the larger world of Eos, is what it's called, and Alticia is one of the cities there. And so the linear sections, chapters 9 through 14, is sort of this tour through these various places as Noctis and his friends are specifically trying to get to the capital of the Empire, where they're going to find the crystal, and then eventually with the goal of reclaiming the city of Insomnia back in Lucius.
They're as the last mission likes to tell you, they are searching for the cure for insomnia.
Look, we have to talk about that. It's
the fucking puns in this game get out of control.
They get worse near the end. It's bizarre.
Even if I don't like the story, I at least recognize that it is a dramatic story, and having this big dramatic sequence at the end with a lot of character drama, and then the fucking screen fades to black, and then I see chapter 14, a cure for insomnia, pop up with my experience tallying. I'm like, oh, fuck off! What is with the puns in this motherfucking video game?
Yeah, the localization just went way the hell overboard. And, it's not just puns in the last few hours. They start having Prompto just drop movie references.
Yeah.
And things like that, where he's just quoting movies and shit like that. And I just... and part of it was because I became acutely aware of it after you and I talked. But I think even then, they really go into overdrive. And I don't get it. Whatever you think about the story, I think in Japanese it has a pretty clear sense of tone. And who the characters are and what their voices are. And I and you know, I heard some of the English voices over the weekend because I was doing some hard stuff in the end game and I needed to look up videos. And of course, most of the people playing this on YouTube playing it in English.
Yeah.
The voice acting is horrible. I don't know what to say about it. It's so off from what I think those characters are. And I think in Japanese, there is some tremendously powerful voice acting in this game, especially near the end. Like the actor who plays Noctis.
He's very, very good.
He's very good, and he does some great stuff. And I heard him in English, and he's like a flippant. Like they really went with just the stereotypical look of the character, not who the character is beyond that.
Right.
Like he sounds like just a member of NSYNC or something, and it's so off from what that character is. I really think if you're playing this only in English, you're really missing out on for better or for worse, what the game is trying to be.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, but it's unfortunate that like it's not just the voice acting. Like the subtitles are pretty deficient. Like there's a couple of, I mean, literally like they don't ruin it, but the last line in the game is Noctis looking at his friends and saying, "I love you guys."
Yes.
And they translate it as "You guys are the best." And it's like those are not the same fucking thing. Like they are similar lines. They do not mean the same thing. Like I could not believe that they translated that line that way.
Oh, there's another. I mean, I really love the end of this game, and I think there's some really powerful moments of acting where one of Noctis's last lines before he takes the throne, for instance, in that final scene, is he says to everyone, arigato. Basically, he says thank you, guys, and for that one they translated it the opposite way, where he says I love you all in English.
Yeah,
and that's another one where not that that's like a bad sentiment. It's just like. That's supposed to be a really reserved. He's becoming the king. Like he's saying it in a regal, stately way. And the counterpoint to that is the scene you're talking about where he says, I love you. And
where he opens up at the end.
They totally mistranslated these things and like swapped it around. I don't know what the English localization team was doing with this game. And I don't know if anyone on like the Japanese development team talked to them and was like, what the fuck are you doing with my game? Why does Noctis call Ignis Specs? Why is Prompto dropping fucking puns and movie references everywhere? Why did you call our last mission The Cure for Insomnia when you have ridiculous city names, as Final Fantasy often does?
Yeah.
It only works if you don't draw attention to it.
Yeah, exactly.
When you make it a pun, it ruins it.
Yeah, it's something where it's like, I almost kind of think that they should have... normally I would not feel like this for localizations, but for some stuff, it's like maybe they should have actually changed the name of the city because it's like, like calling the city Insomnia, which is like it is the English word insomnia in Japanese. It's not like the Japanese word for the condition of insomnia.
No, yeah.
It's like that effect is very different in Japanese than just like the word insomnia in English, which is an English word, and so like the connotation is different. That's like a more minor point, but it is the localization. All across the board is really weird, but it is definitely once like, whether the dramatic storytelling works on you or not, like the way it is handled in the English side of things is like fucking ridiculous, and I do not understand why it was translated the way it was.
Yeah, and for the most part, it's not like you're going to lose plot beats, like that's explained, and they're not like changing motivations or things like that, but it is, I think, just some of those character things that to me work really well and are what makes the story work for me. I do think is robbed quite a bit in English, and I think if I'd played it that way, I probably would be much less forgiving of certain issues because I wouldn't have the connection that allows me to not overlook, but look past maybe.
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's worth mentioning right off the bat.
Yeah. So then, localization issues aside, we're into the linear structure, and so what's... one of my issues with the linear section of the game, while I really enjoy the like conceptually that construction, and you talked about it on last week's podcast, and I thought it's a fascinating idea of you start with this open world section of the game, and then you funnel the players into this very straightforward, like not even like I was going to say traditional, but it's not even really traditional for Final Fantasy because it's way more linear than that, of like this like series of like short chapters of that bring you to the end. And while like I like the idea of it, I think the execution is like there are a number of story beats that like feel insanely truncated in that section. And like I guess everything about that section of the game feels truncated. Of like every single chapter, with the exception of chapter 13 that we'll talk about, is like 15 to 30 minutes long, and it's like you are just like barreling through them. I feel like there was one of the chapters is like it felt like you like got off of a train, talked to like 5 people, and got on a fucking train again.
That's the one I have a problem with specifically is the Tenebrae chapter.
Yeah.
It does feel And I like the material there a lot. I think there's some good moments, but it feels like you see Tenebrae in the distance, and I'm like, there was a scene there. Like, that clearly...
Yeah, I feel like every single one of these chapters, you look at something, it's like, oh, there was like a larger, small open world here, or there was like... there was a boss fight here, or there was like... Or like, you know, when you come up to the Shiva statue, it's like, there was going to be something more here, and then there wasn't.
Yeah, and I feel that way about some and not the others. You know, I think Alticia is the full city, and you can explore. And
although it felt like there was going to be more stuff to do in there, because there are literally no missions set in that area. It's like you go off onto a mission that is set in the city, but is different geometry and everything. But like, you can go into that city and then go talk to the dude that's in the cafe, and then go to those gates, and you are out of Alticia, and that's like all that is there.
You can breeze through it. I didn't. I enjoyed, you know, going around it. But yeah, it's an issue I have with a lot of the game, which is that I don't know if the narrative specifically leverages its world building as much as it should.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this push and pull between how much do you want to just trust the players to make what they will of that, and how much do you want to pull them along enough that they get what you need them to get out of it. And it's a question with a lot of open world games, and I don't think this one gets that balance perfectly right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyway, Alticia is fucking beautiful. I just want to say that.
Yeah, like, it's really beautiful. I wish there was
I get it. Yeah.
more to do there, because it's like,
Although I really like the Alticia portion of the game. I like that story-wise and stuff. We can talk about it.
Yeah, it's like, well, okay, there's one thing we can talk about with that. But yeah, like, but you get there, and it's like, oh, this is so beautiful. And then, like, I walked over, and I bought, like, my car decals and my FF Type 0 soundtrack, which is the first thing I do anytime I go anywhere in that game, is it's like Gwent in The Witcher 3. In this, it's who is selling the fucking car shit and the soundtrack. I need to buy this immediately before I forget. I did that. I did some of the bounties that the one dude at the cafe gives you, because he also, if you want to get to level 99 really quick in this game, that guy also sells you 100% up XP food. And I saw that, I was like, ha.
And there's a hotel where you can get three
times XP there.
I was about level 80 when I got platinum, so that's how I did that.
I'm level 99 right now in the game.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I was. Actually, maybe we should back up a little bit, because I forgot to give this context. Is I did way more of the open world stuff before going into that than I thought I was going to, and really planned on doing. There's something about the mechanics of the game, of like the day-night cycle, and having to fucking like take one quest and like go and do it and then come back and talk to the people, and like the travel time and all that like, even if I kind of like despised it, it was almost like you talking about Stardew Valley or something. It was like the scheduled nature of it kept on pulling me to like keep on doing
very
more
addictive.
And more and more. Exactly, addictive is the right word for it. Some of it is addictive and satisfying. Some of it is addictive and like pulling your teeth out, but you know, playing with like a teeth or something, like a gum wound with your tooth, and it's like, it hurts, but I just can't stop doing this, you know? Like, there's something weird about the sensation.
I get it. Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of like that. So I was, you know, kind of gaming the experience system with the 2 times XP thing in the open world, because I did not know that Atelcia would have had a 3 times XP, or I would have waited until I got there, and, well, I couldn't have, because they'd make you cash in your fucking XP when you do some story stuff. But anyways, long story short, I was level 64 by the time I started the linear section of the game,
Jesus.
Which colors a lot of my impressions on how some of the combat stuff goes, and probably how Chapter 13 went, because I just fucked everything on my way through that game. I was level 64. I also had the Ultimate Blade, so I had the second strongest weapon you can basically get on Noctis, and I just went in there and I was like, hey everybody, / you're dead, / you're dead, / you're dead, and just like breeze walked my way through the game, which is the way I like that combat, because when that combat is hard, I find it extremely frustrating. So I enjoyed some stuff in this game that I suspect I would have actually not liked, like some combat sequences I would not have liked as much if I was not insanely overpowered. It felt good.
Interesting. I was level 47 when I beat the story. So
yeah, because that's around, it seems like, because I think the last boss is like 42 or something like that. Yeah. So that seems like around where you
I felt I had a healthy challenge, and I like the combat system fine. So yeah, it's...
Yeah. So like that's a little bit of... Like, we'll talk about it. I think Chapter 13 is the one that probably, like, my experience with that is probably different than some people's, because I did not have to engage with any of the stealth stuff or anything like that.
Look,
because, like...
can I just say my piece on Chapter 13 now?
No, we'll get there when we get there.
Okay.
Like,
I'm frustrated with.
we will have this because that is a much bigger discussion that has like a lot of facets to it.
I know. I think people are miscoloring Chapter 13, but
I mean, it is a dreadful chapter, but maybe
It
not
is
always
not.
for the reasons that people describe it for. Anyways, but so that is like my situation going into it is I had done a huge amount of the side quest stuff. Like I had gotten that there's like the highest trophy you get is like for completing 80 side quests. I had that before I left.
I just got that yesterday, so
Yeah. I was ahead of the curve. And man, that Ultimate Blade is really fucking strong for that part of the game.
I don't think I ever. Where do you find that?
It's the ultimate version of the Engine Blade, which is if you keep on upgrading that, you have to do some grindy bullshit to get it to the last level.
I never really did any of the weapon upgrading, so
yeah,
because the weapon, if you play the game just kind of straight through, it gives you the weapons you need and stuff like that. So like the Sword of the Father you get in Chapter 13 is very powerful, and you can use that. I use that all through the end game. It really works on
that has really good stat boosts on it, so I keep it equipped. But actually, like one of the things I wish this game had more gear. It's another one of the elements of the game that feels like weirdly truncated. Is like when you get down to it, there's really like 5 or 6 types of each weapon, and it's like it's a pretty brief upgrade window. And actually, there's like a store you can go to in one of the hunter areas in the open world that like I went to before I went through the game, that other than special weapons like the upgradable weapons and some you get through quests in the post game, those sell you the most powerful weapons in the game, like the most powerful normal weapons.
Right, I found that too.
So it's like it's kind of like that gear part of the game is a little bit weird. But anyways, so that's the open world stuff. Alticia, let's talk about.
Can I say? Can I say my overall thoughts on this part of the game?
Okay,
we haven't done that yet.
Sure.
I just in terms of because you said your piece on the overall linear.
Yeah.
I like the overall linear part a lot. I think there are definitely parts that feel truncated. There are parts to this entire game that feel truncated. I think I've written a lot of notes on this game, so I can write up a piece on wherever it lands on my top 10 or whatever. And one of the things I kept kind of coming back to was it kind of feels like we're seeing the story of this game through a keyhole. It's kind of that line from Doctor Strange that Tilda Swinton has. And, you're not at any point really seeing the full scope of it, and I do think that's disappointing in some parts. But what comes through to me was still immensely powerful if I look at the overall through line. And I think this is just something you and I have talked about before, which is that I think you're someone who in storytelling is more interested in structure and some of those things than I am. And I come off way more on things like emotion and atmosphere.
Yeah, I like to have powerful thematic arguments in my stories. I think more than
I like that too.
We both in the same way that I really like powerful melodramatic emotional beats as well. Right. Yeah. But I think we kind of fall a little bit on different sides on what we prioritize more than.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this game is actually a really good example of that. Yeah. When I follow the main arc of the game, it works for me very well, even if I do think, obviously, there are spots along the way and character motivations that do not get fully explained or elucidated, and I think that's too bad. But the overall thrust of it worked for me. And I think if I describe the overall way the linear stuff works in relation to the open world thing for me, is I like how you have the open world thing. There are issues there, but they fell away from me the more I played, because what it's doing to me is it's creating this space of memory and nostalgia and this area where it is kind of a halcyon days kind of thing for these characters. And I think they leverage that really well in the linear part, especially the closer you get to the end. And I think there's some specific beats with how they leverage that moved me immensely, and how they, really the core of this game is those 4 characters and their relationship and their friendship. And I think with Noctis especially, what I like about the open world part, and it starts throwing this at you as soon as you get to Alticia and some of the story beats that happens there, is it tears him the fuck down more and more and more. And his friends, there is this, thematic thing that goes on where each character disappears for a while, has a big injury, comes back and is changed. And then, of course, it comes down to that line that Bahamut gives Noctis, which is that the people who have made the sacrifice for you, you are the king, you have to make it back for them. And that's what the end of the game is for Noctis. And I think the way they build to that moved me very heavily, in that each part of the linear section, each chapter, changes up the gameplay mechanics in some way, gives you a very different gameplay mechanic. The chapter 13 is very different than the stuff you do at the boss fight in Alticia, which is very different than the Ifrit fight at the end of chapter 14 and things like that. So each one really changes that up and puts you, you have had this immense section in the open world where you have a pretty good feeling for what the fundamentals of this game are, and then as it is doing to Noctis, it is challenging you the same way over and over again and bringing him sort of lower and lower and lower. And it's one of the things we'll get to with Chapter 13. I like how it explores liminality and things like that with the character in terms of getting into these spaces where he's very lost and has to build himself back up. And I think that's something that the gameplay leverages intelligently in terms of playing off your expectations of what you have in this open world, which, like most open worlds, is homogenized at a certain point of what you have played and what you expect out of it. And so that is why it works for me. And I think a lot of the narrative beats, why they work specifically, is because of what experiential stuff you bring to the game, because of what time you played with it, and then how it leverages that in the linear part. So that's my piece on that overall, and I just wanted to say that up front because I can get into the micro and things I dislike. That's the macro view of it, and that's why it works for me.
Yeah, so like for me, I think I get the theory of it, of like what you're saying, and like I understand why it would work for you. For me, like that stuff is it just felt like if this game did not have the linear section, I would have liked it more because I think the story would in some ways almost like be more effective of like I don't think the story that they tell in the linear section connects very strongly or in some ways at all with like how I experienced the open world. And it felt like in a lot of this game, it felt like, you know, like maybe this is me projecting too much of knowing that it had a very troubled production, but it felt like we have this game, we have like all these materials, all this time, like we've switched directors, we've done all this shit, and we don't have a lot to show for it, but we do have like this one open world section that we kind of got down. Like, let's just double down on that and then do what we can with the story, because I just don't think the story, while you are in the open world section, ever leverages the open world section effectively. And so many of like character moments, character introductions, plot things, exposition, that stuff is either like, if it exists at all, it either exists outside the game in the form of Kingslave in Brotherhood, or it exists in optional, very easy to miss scenes that only occur at specific campsites and motels and stuff like that. Like
or books and radio and stuff.
Yeah, like the best scene in the whole game is one with like you and Prompto on a motel rooftop at night that like a bunch of players probably never saw. Like I barely saw it. I saw it like 30 minutes or something before I started the linear section. I could have very easily missed that if I hadn't decided to do a couple more quests after I had turned in all my XP, you know? And so like that stuff, so much of the plot of the open world section of the game takes place after the like road trip wedding thing has already been broken, and you are like spinning your wheels in weird ways that then once you get to the linear section, like I did, like there's some sort of experiential nostalgia around like playing around with those characters, but I feel like there is this weird discord between that experience and what the main plot has been telling me the whole time, because I have been defying the main plot in so many ways by saying like, fuck it, like fuck this shit about going and finding like the lightning god. I want to just fish, you know? And like to me, like the game feels like there are two pieces to it. There's the open world piece, and like all the game mechanics in that and all that stuff is so good. And then there's this linear story they try to bolt on top of it. And while some of it works kind of effectively in that you build some natural affection towards the characters, I think they don't do a lot of very strong work investigating the characters they establish and the themes they establish and the ideas they establish through their actual linear storytelling. And a lot of that never worked for me at all.
I understand. I don't disagree with a lot of this in theory. Just as I think you were saying, you don't disagree with what I'm saying in theory. I mean, that is an issue with the open world, and by the time I got to the end of the linear stuff, I realized, like, it had just gelled for me in some way, even though I wish in the open world part they had found a way to integrate the storytelling and the road trip nature of it. But still,
God, I wish this was just a fucking road trip game. Why can't they just make a road trip game? Why does it have to be about, like, the end of the world and the darkness coming and all that shit? Like, why can't it just be not just having to go on a road trip with his three buddies and learn, like, the value of life outside of the kingdom and the capital? That feels like the story they wanted to tell and then they didn't.
Well, I wonder if it's the other way around. Because, like, I was looking at once after I beat the game, I was looking at different pieces of marketing from over the years on this. Like, first I went back and watched the very first
Versus 13
reveal, and it is fascinating to me how much of that did survive to the final version, like with the Armiger system and like Noctis's character design, which is softer, but it's pretty much Noctis.
Yeah. Although, from what I understand, like all of the main plot stuff in like most core characters like changed almost completely from that. Yeah.
But like then you watch, so I watched that, but then you watch the reveal trailer for 15, which was at E3 2013, and that has all the characters. It's got the combat system. All of that is there. But there's no hint of an open world in there. Like, it's clearly like that. It's that everything in that trailer is not in the game because it's a opening chapter in Insomnia where you as Noctis and the three guys are there while it falls and then escape.
I'm almost surprised they didn't put the footage from that trailer in as a dream sequence somewhere in this game because they really like to leverage their fucking marketing materials and everything
they did,
as storytelling devices in their game in a weird way.
But like that suggests to me that probably while Nomura, throughout the time Tetsuya Nomura was directing this, it was just going to be a linear game with different chapters. And then, I think at some point, I don't know where the open world came into it or anything like that, but it feels like that's probably what the last 3 years of development was that, and then leveraging the story on top of all that and trying to make it all come together, which it does and it doesn't in different ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't feel like it feels as unfinished to me in some of these ways where I do think, like, yes, the two halves are very different, but I also think, like, just the overall art design and things like that, and the way the characters work throughout it, and how, in the end, it's calling back to things you saw in the open world, and just, like, the specific beat the story ends on to go into credits. It doesn't feel the way, like, a Metal Gear Solid 5 does, where you're just playing unfinished levels at the end of that game. I don't feel that
I mean, like, because Metal Gear Solid 5 is on a different level of, like, there are whole subplots that, like, just or subplots, or arguably the main plot of that game just straight up does not ever get resolved. And, like, Knights of the Old Republic 2 is what I mentioned earlier. And, like, this is not severe as that, where that game was so unfinished that you literally watch one cutscene where a character dies, and then that character is not actually dead in the story, and you never find out why. You don't know if, what the fuck that was. Like, that game basically ends with, like, a slideshow of text that tells you what happens at the end. Like, that game was completely unfinished. This doesn't have that effect. This more feels like it was like that, but then they managed to pull their shit together just enough to, like, okay, let's do this cinematic and put it here, and, like, there are clearly sections of the game, and this is like I don't want to bring this up too much because it's kind of weird outside stuff, but after beating the game, I did go onto some forums and was, like, reading some stuff. And there was a leak about 6 months before this game came out from one of the people in the development of it that they talked a lot about the story stuff. And now that the game is out, we can basically confirm that, well, yes, because that guy was 1-to-1 on, like, the entire plot of this game. And then he talked a lot about, like, different things that were going to be in the game that were getting cut, or, like, sequences they were working on that maybe weren't going to come out. So, like, I had this impression well before, like, reading that stuff. But then after reading that stuff, like, there are, like, an unnaturally large amount of things in this game that they were working on that got cut to get this game shipped. And, like, I feel like you can see those holes in, especially, like, when you do, like, the time jump forward and stuff like that, and you are only in that, like, dark world for, like, 5 minutes and stuff like that. Like, there are large areas and sections and monsters and characters that have things happen to them, or things occur in, like assets that are used so briefly that it's so clear that there was designed to be way more here, and a lot of this stuff feels patched together. I do think that, like, that patchwork is way better than some other unfinished games I've played, but it in no way ever feels like this is the version of the game that, like, the people making this team really wanted to get out the door. It feels like a heavily compromised version of this game, which I feel is also in many ways confirmed by them saying, like, a week or two after the game released of, like, okay, yeah, we're patching in, like, cutscenes and stuff like that. We're, like, doing that for different sections of the game. It's like, okay, like, yeah, like, there are clearly lots of things that you really want to get into this game that was more than just the occasional Halo 2, like, we cut a level and had to have a super long cutscene. It's like, no, you cut out some pretty substantial portions of this game.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, yeah, that's definitely part of the experience of this game.
Yeah.
So, anyway, let's go ahead and go through some of this. You wanted to talk about Alticia. So this is the portion with Luna Freya, and we have the summoning of Leviathan and all of that.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, it's like, we say this because it is, like, literally the first thing that happens in the linear section, but this is kind of where the plot of the game lost me, is that they kill Luna Freya off fucking immediately. Like, you get out of that open world, and that is, like, practically the first thing that happens is they just fucking kill her. And, like, Noctis and her have, like, a minute of shared screen time together. Like, she imparts, like, I think she imparts her dying words on him. I don't actually remember. Maybe she's dead by the... Okay, yeah.
Well...
But, like,
it's in the spirit kind of thing.
Yeah, and there are some like weird ethereal cutscenes that are like the cutscene after she is dead is very beautiful, but it's also just like, why was she even in this fucking game at some point if like you are just going to fridge her immediately? Like it just felt like she existed so blatantly for the purpose of the plot and to give Noctis a character motivation, and like at no point did I buy their relationship together. At no point was I mean, I was interested in Luna Freda's character before she was killed because I thought they were building up to something with her. I thought in a lot of like in like Kingsglaive and stuff, there was a sense of there maybe being something more to her that like I kept on hoping so hard that they were going to reveal like that she didn't really love Noctis that much because they barely know each other, and like it's only that like it is her duty, like that's what she cares about. But none of that really comes up, and if anything, like that interpretation that I was kind of hoping they were going to go for that felt like it could have worked gets destroyed by some of the stuff they show you later after the fact of her like talking about the wedding and stuff and with her brother. And it's like, no, okay, it seems like you are just like really sort of slavishly dedicated to Noctis for whatever reason, and it's not just this like oracle duty thing you've got. And like she just feels like the most generic, cliche, underdeveloped like princess character I've seen in the story in a long fucking time. And they just fucking kill her immediately. I couldn't believe how quickly they just like they could not wait to get her in the grave.
I disagree on some levels here. I mean, yes, it's the first chapter after the open world, and she does die there.
Yeah.
And it's fast and it's surprising. I think there's a pretty substantial section of that chapter that is all about her. And
sure.
You know, and I think she made to me a very strong impression there. And I think I really like the Altissia section just in terms of, I think it's aesthetically just overwhelming, some of the stuff they do there.
The game is stylish as fuck. Like, that never goes away.
I think the fight with Leviathan, jaw-dropping to me.
Yeah.
The specific progression of images, and there's a lot of stuff like this in the linear section where I just thought, like, this is clearly stuff Tetsuya Nomura did, and it's where I find it weird that he is not credited as co-director on this game. Just because there's like that entire Altissia section, that is as Tetsuya Nomura as you can possibly get, with like some of the stuff of just this entire, you know, apocalyptic scale of the Leviathan coming in, and then Noctis trying, you know, your friends are trying to get the people out of the city, and you're trying to get there, and just, I've never seen a game operating on that kind of technological scale. I think it feels like we stepped a generation ahead to see some of that stuff in the Altissia section even happen on a PS4. And then you get there and you're not waiting, and it's really tough. And I think that entire sequence where, you know, I think the way it's done aesthetically is very powerful with Arden coming in and he stabs her, and she kind of is able to give, with her dying words and all stuff, this power to Noctis, and then it leverages that into the gameplay, and you're fighting the Leviathan. I think that's a really cool sequence and boss fight. And then the sequence after that where she dies, you called it a beautiful cutscene. I think it's incredibly beautiful, and I liked that a lot and found it moving. And I guess what it made me think of throughout there was, I was like, oh, they're going to kill her right now. I don't like that. I don't know, the way it's done to me, though, is I feel like they're kind of aware that that's the thing that's happening, is that you're going for that goal the whole time, and then she dies and it's taken from you. And
But they never really convinced me. Like, sure, like Noctis as a character, whatever. Like, he wants to go get her, but like me as the player, like, you spend like no time with Luna Freda. Like, you get a couple of very brief flashback sequences, like 2 or 3 before you meet her. Then she gives like that one speech, and then she gets stabbed and she's dead. And it's like, I'm never invested in her really as a character or in their relationship as an actual thing. I'm only invested in her as like this hypothetical character and their relationship as this hypothetical relationship. And so to me, it had no real emotional impact, even if I recognized that like how well executed like a lot of the production of all of it was. Like the actual emotional thrust of it felt so blunted to me by like, have her, like, let me spend time with her, you know, like, you know, Final Fantasy VII didn't kill Aerith off in, like, the first 3 hours of that game. You spend time with her as a character to get to know her before she gets killed, you know?
Sure, and I do think that's one of the things you could have done in Altissia that would have been really cool, is having a significant segment that was you and Luna Freda.
Yeah, like, you know that whole part where you go with Iris on that date around the Tenebrae, not Tenebrae, but, like, whatever the city in, the open world section is, and then like that kind of goes nowhere because they don't ever do anything with that character. It's like, do that with Luna Freyna instead, because she's actually important to the main plot. Like, if they had killed Iris, I would have been way more affected by that, because I really liked her sections in the game. I liked going on that date with her, like getting the tour of the town. I liked like having her ride in the car with me, and then going to that one weird dungeon and having her ride a pink chocobo and all that. Like, that's all
good, yeah.
Really good. And then that character goes away, and instead you're giving Luna Freyna back, and it's like, oh, well, I guess we're not going to learn anything about her, really. The most we learn about her is after she is killed, which is a pretty ass-backwards way to try to handle that like, emotional beat.
I guess, yeah. I mean, yeah, I wish they had done more with her in that part. It affected me, and maybe I'm just being worked over by the production. I don't know. I do think I can't ignore that part of it from me and the effect it had, but I think that entire section and the way it comes down at the end with that specific cutscene, and then the reveal of what's happened to Ignis, and then the jump to the train and some of the stuff that happens there, I think it kicks off a tone for that section of the game that worked very well for me. But again, I'm talking about this on that scale of the keyhole metaphor I had of, I can see the bigger thing that was there, and it's not all there. And, sometimes that kind of thing really falls flat for me, like in a Metal Gear Solid 5, and sometimes it works. In this case, it worked. So, yeah, that part of the game, I was actually, that's where I was off a really pretty high moment when I got to that, because that's where I had stopped playing last week when I was talking about this game on the podcast.
Oh, okay.
Was I had just gotten basically to the train. I had saved when you start the train sequence.
Okay, yeah, because for me, that was the part where because I was like pretty kind of pumped of like, okay, I've done like all this stuff in the open world, time to go do this Alticia stuff, and then I was a little bit disappointed by the Alticia stuff because there wasn't as much there as I was kind of hoping, and like, I kind of wish you had not mentioned the arena, because I had assumed that the arena was like you get to fight stuff.
I like the arena.
It's cockfighting. Like, I'm not here to like watch AI fight other AI. Like, I'm here to fucking kill shit. That's what I'm here for.
I found it fun. I spent a little time there, and you get some good stuff. You get a really good reel for your rod, and you can get something for your car to make it go faster. So that was good. That's only affects the post game at that point, but. Yeah. It was
but so like I found like Alticia was like this really like brief truncated area that it also is like kind of weird to be like, oh wait, this is just like the place from the Platinum demo. And it's like I did more stuff in the Platinum demo in that area, because it's like the whole area, like that kind of terrace area where you're in the Platinum demo. They don't do anything with that spot in the game. It's kind of weird.
No, I wish they did more.
So then like I did all that stuff. I was like, oh, like Alticia, this is like sort of short, and then I went off on the one main quest, like not actually really thinking that would be like one where it's like, oh, this is like where this whole city basically gets destroyed, and I'm not coming back here until I'm done with this game. But you go off on that mission, and then they do that stuff, and it's like, it is all very impressive and cool looking for sure, and like the music is great, like. All like throughout all of this discussion, like just take for granted, it looks fucking awesome and the music is amazing, because that is always true. I'm not going to take that away from the game, but like to start off the sort of like story intensive part of the game by just killing the character that they had been building up to you meeting the entire time, like so just threw a wet blanket on the experience. And then I think for me, moving into the second, like the next chapter, I think while like. There's they do a little bit to try and kind of justify why Gladio is being such a fucking dick. I don't think they like that conflict feels a little extra forced to me than it needs to a point where like I was kind of getting fed up with it, from like not just like me sympathizing with Noctis, and more just that like this is getting fucking annoying of like, shut the fuck up, Gladiolus, like you. I don't know why you are as mad at me as you are, and like the Ignis stuff, I thought like them blinding Ignis and handling that, I think that is probably the best story stuff in the whole linear section of the game. I think they handled that pretty well. But like, there's something about like Gladiolus doing this like full heel turn of just like being a massive fucking cliche dick, and it's like it's such the cliche. Like, we need to have this plot moment in this kind of plot of having like this tension between some of the group, but like. There are ways to do that well, and there is the way they did it in this game.
Okay, I'm not even entirely sure what you're talking about, because it worked for me, and I didn't find it anywhere near that intensive, I guess.
It was just like there's something really weird about we kill off Noxus's love interest and all that stuff, and he gets the fucking ring, and then we cut to a few weeks later, and he's bummed out, and Gladiolus just walks up and is like, what the fuck are you doing, man? Why are you so bummed out all the time? It's like, why aren't you wearing the ring? Like, you're just going to wear it around your neck. It's like, why the fuck would he be wearing the ring? Like, yeah, he's sad. Fucking of course he's sad, but he's still going to do whatever the fuck it is you people are trying to do right now in the plot, because that's not very clear. But he's still trying to, like, it just felt so, like, sort of abrupt in a weird way of, like...
Okay, it didn't feel abrupt to me because, one, I feel like that's a natural evolution of the role Gladiolus is playing in the whole game, which is this big brother thing where he is trying to bring out the best in Noctis at just about every turn. And that's kind of... He is trying to see this guy as the best version of himself. And at that moment, one, everything has fallen to utter shit in their lives and their goal, and he feels like maybe he cannot believe in this person the way he wants to. I mean, that's specifically something he says about you being the king and you're not living up to that. And I feel like they got through all of this and they had, is he being unreasonable on some level? Yes. I also feel like Noctis is at that point. So there's this low point for all of them. Ignis, their best friend, has just been blinded for life and this kind of stuff. So that worked for me just fine. And I think it's another thing where, that's a part where you go through this dungeon, which is something at that point, again, that is fairly familiar to you. But now you have this extra layer of you have to wait for Ignis because he's blind.
Or you just keep on running because...
Yeah, well, yeah.
I was level 64. I don't need them to help me in the fights.
Well, anyway. Well, you can, however you want to play
sure,
it.
Yeah.
But you have that. You have Gladiolus being, what am I trying to say? Visibly mad at you, verbally mad at you, those things. And, it's another thing where it's like, okay, now I'm doing something that was familiar to me in this game, and it feels different because circumstances have changed. That worked for me very well. I
think maybe it's just like the transition feels so abrupt. And it's one of the, I think, and that's like true of kind of this whole section of the game, is there's like this, you are just moving so quickly from plot point to plot point to plot point to plot point without like a lot of time for anything to breathe or develop. And when you do have time to breathe, I don't even think they use it as effectively as they could, because I did like you are on that train and like you just have to be on the train until it arrives. I felt like you could have like done something more here. And there's something like specifically in this section, I felt like this in a weird way of like, you can't really talk to people in this game ever. And normally it's kind of fine, but there's something about it getting into this section of the game of like, why can't I just fucking like talk to Prompto? Like, why can't I talk to Ignis? Like, why can't I engage with these people in the world? And it's something that's especially weird when you get to Tenebrae. There is, in all the game, this is the only instance I've ever found this. There's one fucking person. It is like the people, the two dudes who are going to like conduct your train. You can get an optional conversation with them, and when you talk to them, the screen fades to black, it fades back up with a unique camera angle that's centered on their face, and they talk to you for like a solid 2 to 3 minutes. It's like, that's the only one of those in the entire fucking game, and it feels like there are spots scattered around the linear section. Like specifically, I remember where like it hit me the hardest was getting off that train, and you see Prompto is like leaning over this rail, looking out over the landscape in such a like posed way that's like, oh, I've played video games before. I'm going to walk up over to him and have an optional conversation about like all the shit that has happened and find out, where are we? Why are we here? Where are we going to? Where are we trying to go? What are we trying to do? Like, how does Lunafrena dying affect what we are trying to do? Like, how are you feeling about that? How are you feeling about the Ignis stuff? Like, there's so much tension and weird, convoluted expositional shit wrapped up in the narrative that needs to get unspooled in some way. And, like, that would be the perfect way to do it, and you can't do it. And so it just, for me, like, that point on, like, that stuff just gets so tangled and wrapped up that, like, by the time they try to deliver some like emotional moments, it's just like couching like, why the fuck are we trying to go to the Empire again? It's like, did we find out that the crystal is here, or are we just assuming that at this point? I had to go rely on like loading screen tips between chapters of being like, okay, yeah, we are still heading towards the Empire, right? Because nobody is talking about what our objective or motivation is at this point anymore. Like, that shit has just been like forgotten in the story. Like, are we still trying to find the 6 gods? Whatever happened to trying to find all the royal arms? Like, what is the plot doing at this point? I felt like constantly sort of confused by, not in an extreme way, but just enough to feel like I don't really know what we're doing anymore here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, in those parts, I agree with you. Like that, I remember the same moment where Prompto is leaning over the railing, like, I'm going to go talk to him. Oh, you can't. There definitely
Yeah,
were
I think you can prompt on him, but all he does is say like, "Hey, we should probably go down that elevator." It's like, okay, thanks, Prompto. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do wish, actually, it's in that part, when you get to, like, the Dark World part, there's a couple of moments where I wish they had more conversations with your main team, because those are the characters you care about, those are the core characters here,
And
I
it just
feel like...
it feels like things happen to them that are like plot moments, but they never really come across, other than the Ignis being blinded. I think they handle fairly well, but they never come across as like developing character moments because they are breezed by so insanely quickly by the plot. And we'll get to like the Prompto version of that with him being from Niflheim is like the most extreme version of just like this could be a character moment. This could be a thing that develops these characters. But by the end of the game, I came away so disappointed by how sort of flat the relationship with most of your team felt by the end of like it didn't get like complicated in interesting ways. Like I said, for me, the Gladiolus' like version of them trying to complicate that relationship just felt like awkward and forced. And maybe that's just like I don't know like what that is. It's hard for me to sort of like specify why I felt that way, but I just felt that way. But like when they do try to complicate the relationships, it's like brief, quick, and kind of didn't make a lot of sense to me. And for the most part, when you kind of track the character relationship across the game, it's like we start out as friends, we're friends, we have a bump, and we're friends, and we end as friends. It's like it's friendship all the way down, and there's never that moment of like assembling your team or like the team really breaking apart and having to bring them back together, because when those moments happen, they get breezed by with such narrative ease that it's like it never feels like you were ever really apart in a significant way at all. And so that's one of my issues with the game is like it sort of like starts here is like they don't complicate the relationships and develop the relationships with your three buddies in the way that it feels like the story really needs to happen.
Okay. So let's see. So we went through chapters 9 and 10.
Yeah.
11 and 12 kind of blur together. One of them is where you're on the train,
right.
And you have... I actually thought this was a very cool sequence in terms of where the train is being attacked.
Yeah, and you have to like warp strike between the ships. That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. I like that whole sequence a lot. The whole thing where Arden is impersonating Prompto or making Noctis see visions with Prompto. I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff there where it kind of doesn't specifically tell you what's going on, but you wind up getting the gist of it.
Sure.
And then with what happens where Prompto is knocked off the train, and it's another low point for everyone. That winds up coming back in chapter 13 where you wind up finding him. So there's that whole section. I don't know if there's a ton to say about that there.
Yeah, no, it's more a cool gameplay sequence that sets up Prompto being abandoned or whatever, more than it is like there's not a lot of real plot stuff that happens there.
I mean, I think there are moments where I wish they had slowed down and we could have had more in between. The overall pace I found very compelling in terms of how high stakes things felt, and that we're moving towards this climax, and this literal linear. We're on a train. We're trying to get to this one place, and it's definitely a somewhat familiar story beat where pretty much everything they had is lost on the way there. Down to in the beginning of chapter 13, the regalia gets destroyed and things like that. So that overall sense of pace and some of the breathlessness of it worked very well for me. Even if there are parts where I thought, well, this shouldn't be breathless. This is where we need to take a breath. Yeah. So I think there's some moments where that works, some where it doesn't.
Yeah. I think like that chapter is mostly fine because I think that is a moment where that breathless pace works. Of like it's very action focused and like you're like kind of juggling a lot of plates, and I think that is effective. But then you arrive at Tenebrae, and that's like the number one chapter where you're like, is this what is? Because like it was especially like you get there and like it's completely destroyed, and for a second I was like, why is it this? Like, and I don't remember if maybe I just like missed a really critical line of dialogue or something. But there's something at some point it's like, isn't this an Imperial territory? Like, why? Who did the Empire destroy this place? Like, what the fuck happened? Why is everything destroyed here?
The whole city isn't destroyed. You see it off in the distance.
I mean, it's completely on fire, and like you're like all these refugees, and everyone's crying about having lost their homes. Like it felt like you stepped onto the set of fucking Godzilla. It's like
okay,
but like where's Godzilla? Like, that's kind of what it felt
I
like to me.
believe it all has to do with Ravis, which is a character we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Because this is where you start getting into the Ravis stuff. On the train, there are optional like books and radio broadcasts you can hear where basically you find out he's going to be executed.
Or he has been executed. Is there's one conversation I heard in Tenebrae where they're like, "Oh, such a shame that Ravis was executed," which was really weird because I was just talking to Aranea and she was talking about Ravis as if he was alive, and then this little old lady was like, "Oh, if only Ravis was here," and like basically we lost him. And then I get on the train and I read a newspaper and they're like, and he has been suffered like capital punishment. It's like, okay, I guess they killed him. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, the point of the Tenebrae sequence is to go back into Lunafreya and Ravis's motivations and stuff. And there is that one scene with Aranea, or no, not Aranea, because you have a scene with Aranea, but the actual scene is with the woman from Tenebrae.
Yeah, like her, like Lunafreya's handmaiden.
Yeah, and you learn that, and I like that scene. I think it clarifies some things. What I do think what this sequence probably wanted to be is where you would go to her childhood home or something and do like an almost Uncharted Naughty Dog kind of thing where you would walk around and learn things, and this would be a moment where you would kind of wallow in all of those losses. This is definitely the chapter I have the biggest complaints about, because I feel like that's just very naturally, that's what it feels like that is there for, and you get a sliver of it, but not the whole thing.
It's just such a like a weird. It feels like along the development or whatever, like they just had to cut that sequence down so much that it is the most vestigial it can possibly be, because it's like there's like some things that you can't completely cut it out. Like you need to go there because like there's a lot of like people talking about that we're going to go there, and then like once you're there, that like serves as a necessary transition point to the sense of like everything is getting destroyed, even if you have no real reason to understand how or why it is being destroyed. But it is, so like it needs to convey that, but it's all the like actual important details of like what you really want to know is like you get like a brief flashback with Lunafreya, but that doesn't really give you a whole lot. Like it clarifies like is stuff that they've already sort of implied of her serving like her responsibilities as an oracle is going to result in her death for reasons, and like Ravis doesn't want that to happen because he's her brother, and that's the information that comes across. But like that information is like by the time you have gotten to this point, they have streamlined so much about the narrative that honestly like that information is not even really useful anymore. Like Ravis could have been cut out of the fucking plot entirely. Like who gives a shit, you know? Like it would have been smoother if they had just completely cut him out at some point, which would have been hard because he's in Kingsglaive a lot. But like
in Kingsglaive, he also is the one who leaves you the sword.
You could have come up with a billion plot reasons for why that sword is there. Like the Emperor stole it when your father was killed, and you find it in the throne room. Like,
I mean, I think again, it's not fully done, but I think the theme of the whole idea of this was something Lunafreya had and was bequeathing to Noctis, and that Ravis ultimately turned against the Empire to help his sister and do this, and he died for all of this, and it's another moment of Noctis at a literal low point because he's been thrown down the tower, and he finds that there, and you do some readings and realize how much has been sacrificed to get him to that point, and then that sets you up for the moment when you get back up and you talk to Bahamut in the crystal, and it's that idea of him sacrificing back for everything that's been lost.
Yeah, so, like the issue with that is that the version of that they give you is a Wikipedia summary of that plot. That's like it would have been more dramatically effective to me if they had cut it out entirely. Like whether or not if like it had been fleshed out, it could have used as an important detail. Like in the version of the game we got, like it is so muddied and confused and weird that's just like, why is this actually important at this point? Like we have plenty of like other people sacrificing for Noctis, of like Ignis losing his eye and Prompto getting Metal Gear Solided or whatever happened to him. Like we don't need Ravis, like the brother guy, to like sacrifice everything for his sister. We don't need to have that like weird like Spark Notes plot in there as well.
It worked. I mean, I think there could have been more. It didn't bother me, and I also feel like I don't know. I understood it fine enough. It didn't like I looked around and there's like way more lore out there about it, but I didn't feel like I completely was lost because I didn't get every detail of the story.
Although I can see very easily how some people would have been completely lost, because like if you had clicked on that newspaper, or like if I had clicked on that newspaper and decided not to read it, which I have with several of the books I found lying around because I just wasn't in the mood, I would have had really kind of no idea that Ravis was dead. I would have like had the idea in the back of my mind, but like that conversation I overheard was so weird and awkward and felt completely out of place because again, it directly contradicted what I had just been told by a main plot-centric character like Aranea that's like I could totally see how some people would have encountered Ravis' dead body in the next chapter. Just being like, what the fuck happened? Like, why would you not make this more important if, like, you're trying to make it important now? Like, you need to kind of know the context of what happened for it to feel significant to you at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
before we move on, one point, I really like Aranea a lot.
She's a good character.
I think maybe a lot of that is also her voice actress in Japanese is Miyuki Sawashiro, who's like one of my favorite voice actresses. I love her voice a lot.
What else has she done?
She's like in every fucking thing.
Okay.
Like it's not something you've probably seen, but the most prominent role I can think of is she plays a character named Kanbaru in the Monogatari series of anime, which is like a very acclaimed, different kind of thing. But
just for the people,
she's like just look her up on Wikipedia or something.
She's one of those Japanese actors who's in everything.
She is in everything. She's just got such a fucking awesome voice that I was so happy when I ran into her and like when you run into her like boss fight in the open world section, I was like, I could recognize that voice fucking anywhere. You are going to come back again, and I am very happy about that.
Yeah. Ignis is the other guy in this game where if you look up his list of credits, it's insane.
Yeah.
You and I were talking last week about the Persona 5 connection.
Yeah, he is also the voice of Ryuji, who's the Yosuke equivalent in Persona 5, so look forward to that.
He's fucking light in Death Note.
Yes, yeah, he's also that, yeah.
I knew I recognized the voice, because I haven't played Persona 5, so I didn't know that, but like, I knew that voice. I was like, yes, of course that's light in Death Note. That's a pretty distinctive, like, dry voice he has. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. We can go to this at different points, but like, the whole thing of Ignis being blind, I think it's so perfect that he's the character who basically becomes Zatoichi by the end of this game.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually a very, like, I think, natural role for him to fulfill.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the things I really like about the time jump they do is you see how he's kind of learned to live with it, and he's a fucking badass.
Yeah.
So anyway.
The one thing I kind of am bummed out with the Ignis blindness thing that they never really addressed is, like, you could have, like, they made really good use of, in some places, particularly in the blindness section, of taking things that you expected and using them as like a narrative tool of like the cooking thing in particular in the blind section of like where you go to camp and he can't cook because he's blind and so you just have to like eat like canned noodles or something.
Right.
Or if you had bought cup noodles in the cup noodle side quest, you could have had some delicious, refreshing cup noodles to help you through your journey.
How do you feel about the product placement in this game? I think it's lovely.
It goes over the edge to being terrible, then over the edge to being amazing, then over the edge to being terrible, to over the edge to being amazing. I think it's fucking amazing. It's so insanely, ridiculously over the top of like, you just basically, Gladiolus gives this whole speech about like, we had it all wrong, man. It's not just about the meat. It's not just about the eggs. It's not just about the noodles. You can't just get the best meat in the world and make the best cup noodles in the world. It's about all these ingredients put together in the perfect blend that just they all work together. They synchronize their taste amazingness to just bring you pure bliss. We were so misguided. We should just go to the cup noodle stand and buy some goddamn cup noodles. Not this. I've seen the error of my ways.
It's great, and I don't know if this is randomized or something, but I at least got this where one of Prompto's photos when I did that quest was Gladiolus just standing smiling in front of the Cup Noodles truck.
I got that one as well.
That should just be a billboard for Cup Noodles.
Yeah, or like, it should just be like, or him, like you should have, after you did that quest, like when you rested, all 10 of Prompto's photos should have just been different photos of Gladiolus posing with Cup Noodles.
It's pretty great.
But yeah. Anyways, yeah, the cup noodle thing is like, for the people who don't know, cup noodle is a specific brand of food that's like, is not, you don't find it a lot over here, but it's very common in Japan. So it's like, there's a weird product placement deal in this game, and cup noodle sure fucking got their plug that they wanted. But anyways, yeah, like the Ignis stuff, I thought that was an effective twist of gameplay mechanics to sort of deliver an emotional beat of like, oh, right, like, he can't do this anymore. I thought they missed a trick of like trying to do the same thing with him driving, and he can't drive because he's blind. It's like a...
Well, there's no part where he would drive.
Yeah, exactly, so, but it just felt like I was waiting for it to happen, and I was like, oh, you missed a trick with that one, guys.
Yeah. Maybe they could have added a line in the part where you do have to drive the car at the end of like...
It just felt conspicuous to me because at some point in the game, like, I just had him drive me around everywhere while I, like, read an article online or something. Yeah. So it was just... It felt weird that it should have come up in some way.
Yeah. All right, so then you've got the chapter where Biggs and Wedge, which is a nice little Final Fantasy VI reference for you, are driving the train, and you're alone on it, and there's this whole kind of... I really... One of the things that I responded to well in this game, it's just a kind of thing I like in storytelling, is when it gets really metaphysical and weirdly spiritual, and there's a lot of that in the second half of this game, with all the stuff in Alticia, with Luna Freya, and the way it frames some flashback material and dreams and stuff, and then you get that whole... I really like Chapter 12 on the train, with the way... Arden is coming in, but you don't know if he's really there, and kind of that back and forth, and the way Shiva is like, they're dead against the side of the train, which I thought was which I thought was a very powerful, interesting image, and this whole like frozen wasteland, and it feels very desolate the closer you get to the Empire, which is sort of against what your expectations would be. And then that whole sequence where, Arden is harassing you, and then the character Genetina, who was one of the oracles working with, or not one, Luna Freya is the oracle.
She's like the oracle's familiar, or that's what you're told, is she's this weird spirit lady that pops up in your pictures sometimes.
Yes, which is funny. That's a great trophy, too. You get that pop. But anyway, and it turns out she is the spirit of Shiva, did survive. You couldn't literally kill the god. And the way that whole sequence works, I think, is really interesting, and I liked that. Because it's specifically, I don't know, I like that one of the 6 god sequences is not a giant boss fight. And I thought the way they did that was interesting, where you go out, it's very desolate, you fight some monsters, but it's not the big fight you're expecting, and the big fight winds up being something much more internalized on the train between Arden and you and Genetina, who turns out to be Shiva. So I liked all of that.
I thought that was okay. It didn't do much for me, just because at some point the plot of this game devolved so deeply into anime, and more specifically Final Fantasy asked modern Final Fantasy storytelling tropes in devices, in scenes, and dialogue and stuff like that. That at some point just I feel like I've seen those kinds of scenes a billion times in a billion different things, and it didn't hit me really hard. One thing that I thought was a little weird about that sequence, that's not really specific about the Gentiana stuff, but all the stuff of you were riding this train over there, and then I think the first time you see it, this is another instance where the first time you see it isn't a loading screen when you load up the chapters, and you're riding towards Shiva's cold corpse or whatever that she has been killed by the Empire. It's when the fuck did that happen? How has no one talked about how did that happen? When did that happen? Why did that happen? I thought for a long time that the Empire was using you and Luna Freya to get the gods to come out so that they could kill them because they were in hiding or whatever, because you needed to summon them.
Well, yeah, you do see them that they want to kill all the gods. That is established.
Yeah, but it seemed they wait for Noctis to meet the Titan dude or whatever, and then they go in and kill him because he comes out, and then they wait for Luna Freya to summon Leviathan, and so then once Leviathan is summoned, they come in and kill it, or try to kill it. And then it was just oh yeah, and they killed Shiva. And it's it's a number of a bunch of different things that they just kind of happen off screen. Although this didn't happen off screen because they didn't actually kill Shiva, because Shiva was Gentiana the whole time. And so it was just it also was one of those things where I was oh right, we were doing this whole thing where we were collecting all the gods at some point. What happened to that plot? What did it's
it hasn't been that long since you did that the last time.
You do that with Leviathan, and then it cuts to several weeks later, and then it never comes up again. And so it's just I had kind of forgotten that that was what we were originally doing. And it's one of those things that if you could talk to people, it would maybe clarify. Ignis would say, well, without Luna Freya, we have no way of knowing where the gods are, and so we can't do that. But they never do that in the game, and it's something where it's there's a whole series of those sorts of weird motivations you have of oh, we're going to get all the royal arms, and that's not actually a thing for the main plot. That's post game stuff for the most part. And it's okay, that's weird that you tried to present this as the core motivating thing we are trying to do right after the kingdom falls, and then that's not actually what we're trying to do, because then you transition to now we're trying to get all these 6 gods that nobody has ever talked about before, but now we're trying to get them, and then you get a couple of them, and then it's now we're going to the Empire. And it's to do what exactly? And then it's oh, we're going to the Empire to get the crystal. It's because now we know that the crystal is definitely in the heart of the Empire. It's okay. And then it's like, now we're definitely going there because Prompto was kidnapped. I mean, we're already almost there, but now we have a really actually good reason to go there. We've just been heading there the whole time for whatever reason.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's that stark all the time, but yeah.
I think I was constantly just being like, why? Where are we going, and like, what are we trying to do anymore? Like, once Lunafrena is killed, I feel like there had to be something of like that the characters need to try to do something. But
I feel like you do get that. I mean, that's why they're on the train headed for the capital. There are conversations about that.
But all they say is they're trying to head to the capital. They never say what they're trying to fucking do. Like, they never say we're trying to get the crystal to reestablish our kingdom. They never say we're going to go kill the emperor to like save our kingdom. They never say like, because they don't find out about the demon shit and that like the crystal can defeat the demons until after they're already heading towards the imperial capital. So it's like, it feels like they are doing these actions and then they give the motivation for the action after they start committing to the action. And it's like a really weird thing that feels like there's a scene or something cut out that tells you why they are doing what they are doing and like where their objectives now lie, and you just never get that.
I guess I don't know, maybe some of my memories of Kingsglaive are just blurring into the game, because that is, you do know if you've watched like the movie why the crystal is important, why the ring is important. They go through all of that, and I thought some of that was rehashed in the game. I think much more of it should have been.
I mean, I played this like 2 days ago. Like, okay. It is pretty fresh in my mind of being like, and maybe it's something that like if I had read a newspaper or there was a radio conversation or someone that I could have overheard that would have clarified that, but like, that's sort of like critical information that felt like I was so aimless in the plot that I had no idea like what we were actually trying to accomplish anymore, and it felt like really weird. And some of it just got so muddled in like we were trying to accomplish these other things, and then they just are not being addressed in any way. Like they stumble upon like the royal arm thing when they get off the train the first time. It feels like, how did we know that this was here? Why, like, what do we even accomplish by getting these royal arms anymore? Like, how does this address what we were trying to do with the gods? Like, there's just a lot of weird plot things that it feels like there's not a main focus at any point.
Okay. So chapter 13?
Chapter 13. Let's talk about
so you get there. I really like the scene that leads up to that, where you have to get off the train with the regalia. Yeah. It winds up crashing. Yeah. You're there. Prompto's already gone. Ignis and Gladiolus wind up getting separated from you. You're alone, and you've lost all your weapons because Arden has disabled that magic system that Noctis uses. And so now you're kind of at your lowest again, and this is when you choose to don the ring, which I thought was a cool moment for them to bring that in.
Yeah.
And then Chapter 13 is the most different on a gameplay level, because you're in this building, you're trying to get to the top where the crystal is. You really can't fight at the beginning, at least, except for having that crystal, which has a couple different powers. Say your piece, I guess. That's how it's going.
So for me, Chapter 13, I just found dreadfully fucking boring. Like, it just went on. I swear that thing is like 90 minutes long. Like, or at least it felt longer than all the other chapters past like Chapter 9 combined. Like, it is
definitely.
And you are in this really drab, basic, like PS2 looking fucking environment of like you are in this underground laboratory like thing that's just a bunch of brown concrete, and you're just walking through there with no weapon, except for they do give you one weapon that is a weapon that can automatically and immediately kill any enemy you run into with one power, other than like the invincible enemy they throw at you later. It takes it like 2 seconds to do that, and you have to just charge it up, and they make it so that you cannot sprint. So you are walking or like very lightly jogging through this long fucking drab facility with a number of stupid fucking like Dead Space ass jump scares that there are like 8 or 9 jump scares in this game that they try to do of you walking over a robot collapsed on the ground and the robot grabs your leg and you have to mash the circle, and it's like they do that over and over again, and it's just like it's so long for no fucking reason at all. And like, I know there are a lot of people that like there's a whole weird stealth mechanic that is in there and like you hiding and all that shit. I didn't do any of that. I have no idea how that worked or any of that kind of stuff. I just walked through like 500 fucking hallways and evaporating everything in my path with my ring, and just kept on walking and walking and walking and walking and walking, and it just went on for fucking ever. That is my issue with Chapter 13. In like from a gameplay perspective. We'll talk about the story stuff later, but
I didn't feel it was that long. I know a lot of people have been describing it that way, and I don't know. I think I did this one in 2 sittings because, well, Yeah, 2 sittings, because when I left the podcast last week, I went home and started this chapter.
Okay.
And I maybe played an hour of it or so, and so I was pretty near the end, and then I was tired, and I was like, if I go any further, I'm just going to have to beat the game, so I'm not going to do that right now. And then I finished it the next night. So maybe breaking it up for me, since I did not play it in one sitting, maybe that alleviated some of it for me. But I also just, I don't know, I liked this section, and I liked how, again, talking about bringing Noctis to his low point. You get to that low point, you're alone here, you're walking through, there's a lot of surreal elements going on with what Arden is saying to you over this loudspeaker and things like that.
The fucking dozen lines that he says over and over and over again.
I didn't feel like
He repeats a huge amount of dialogue if you're paying attention to it. There, like, he definitely, once you hit certain points, he changes it up a little bit, but like, he said the same kind of lines. I've noticed it particularly because some of those lines, they translated it completely differently in English. Like, I think there was one where he says of like, oh, like you are so weak without your, or like, oh, like he says in Japanese, like, oh, like you with your ring and your sword, this is just borrowed power. And then the English line is translated as, you can do nothing without your borrowed power. I'm like, that is the exact opposite of what he actually said. And he says that like fucking 50 times in that sequence.
Okay.
It happens a lot.
All right. Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe it didn't for me. So you go through that whole part. I liked it. I thought the whole idea of being there with these enemies and you have the ring to just defeat them, and I actually thought, the way you kind of discover those powers as you're going through, and the whole thing where it opens a portal to the sky and sucks them in, I thought was interesting. And yeah, the stealth mechanic is obviously not fully fleshed out, and you don't really need to use it. I do think at my level, at least, there were parts where I could not defeat them with the ring. So, like, because they would kill me too fast, or there would be too many. Yeah, so there were parts where I did have to engage with the stealth thing, and I think sneaking through and doing some of that and trying to get to the top and then being sent back down, but then, like, things are different the next time up as in terms of how you wind up finding all your friends and moving through that and getting to the top. I think it was justified, maybe not to the sheer length it was, and again, I don't know if I have the best sense of that because of how I played it, but especially because this is effectively very close to the climax of the game. You are trying to get to the crystal, and at this point, at least I felt I had a good sense of what that meant, because that's the kingly power.
At that point, you do. That is the point where they have told you all the stuff of, like, 1, we need to go get Prompto. 2, we need to get the crystal, because now we know that it's not just that the crystal constructs a wall of light, that the crystal is what we need to fight against, like, the time of darkness and the demons, because it has that power. That is when they have told you all that stuff. That is when it is clear.
Okay.
Not until that point.
All right. Anyway, yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, could you have? Because I'm not sure how the ring operates mechanically, and this is one of the things, like, reading people's opinions online. Because for people who don't know, Chapter 13 is garnered a very severe reputation online. That I think, like, some people are talking about it way too severely. But like, I was level 64, so maybe my experience is really different than some people's. But this has gained such a reputation that Square Enix has already responded in saying they're going to patch in and make the ring more powerful, or fucking whatever they're going to do to try to, like...
Which I don't like. I think there's a reason. I think a narrative reason he's underpowered here, and I wish people wouldn't ignore that.
Sure.
So
I mean,
there's a narrative
there's a narrative reason he's underpowered, that's fine. If, like, it's boring and really long, like... That's not fine.
Yeah, but buffing the ring isn't going to do that.
Yeah, no, you're right. Buffing, like, you're right. Then the way that, like, them trying to respond to the criticisms in Chapter 13 is completely misunderstanding why people don't like Chapter 13. They don't like Chapter 13 because it is long, it is boring, and they don't like the stealth stuff. And maybe fixing the ring fixes some of the stealth stuff. And like I was saying, reading some stuff online, it sounds like some people... Like, if you are a certain level when you are here, you need to engage with the stealth stuff in a way, or maybe they just didn't try being more combat focused. I mean, the game does basically tell you to try to do the stealth stuff, and when it did, I said, fuck you. Like, no, I'm not doing that.
You also don't have to do it a lot. There's not, I don't know, it's not 500 hallways.
I was obviously using hyperbole there. Like, it is not literally 500 hallways, but it is long, and they are the same hallways. Like, it is just... Because some of them are literally the same hallways in the sense of, like, you get to a certain point and then you fall down and you have to get back up to that point. But it is just like, I found it just, especially because they make it so long and they strip out so many of your mechanics and having your friends with you and stuff, that it's like, there are good narrative reasons to do that stuff, but like that combined with how they handled that section is like, this would have been great if it was like 15 minutes long. It is literally like 90 minutes long. It is so much longer than everything that preceded it, and most of those sections needed to be longer. This is the one that needed to be shorter, and this is fucking super long for what it is.
It is long. I mean, not all of it is stealthily going through corridors. There's a whole large section at the end with boss fights, and you do have everything back, and it is this progression up the tower. I felt in the length I played it, I was totally fine with the length. I did not even know. I was surprised when people were saying that because I did not notice that as a mechanic. And I think part of that also is that, as we've established, I was much more invested in the characters and story at this point than you were. So there was something about that where I felt the atmosphere of it was effective. I think there are some stupid things in there. They don't need to do the jump scares. That adds nothing to the game. It also doesn't ruin the game for me. So
it was just like, it just was piling on of just like, I think the number one thing, honestly, is that you cannot sprint. I cannot understand for the life of me. I mean, I can understand why in like we're trying to underpower you, and it's like this weird like sort of survival horror game nod that we're doing here. Like, I understand sort of like philosophically why you would make it so you can't sprint, but like, dude, like fucking the movement speed is so slow, and like it's the same hallway, and and then having to stop like every other hallway to get jump scared on by another fucking dude. That's like, it's fine the first time you did it, it's kind of fine the second time you did it. It is not fine the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. They did at least 8. I stopped counting after 8 because I couldn't remember anymore.
Many of them are optional. You can't have. It's not
sure, but they don't. I mean, you can jump over them or walk around some of the corpses. Like, sure, but like it's not like they specifically indicate which one is going to jump scare.
No, I know, but I'm not. I'm just saying that's not going to be the same number for every person.
It might be more for some people.
Sure.
Like it's something where it's just. I think that some of the people's reaction to Chapter 13 is excessive, although, again, there was literally no gameplay challenge aspect to it at all for me. Like, I was so powerful at this point that when they throw the invincible enemy at me, like, I found out for sure that it was invincible because I was fighting it and was like, okay, I'm going to pop some of these items, I'm going to put on this, like, sword, I'm going to fucking just straight up kill this thing, and you can't kill it.
Okay.
Until it will jump away and then it comes back with full health. It's like, God damn it. I had in the gameplay sense with the level I was at, I could have killed that thing. They don't.
They do make it clear. I mean, I think Arden specifically says you can't kill this thing.
Yeah, so what? Like, just because he says I can't kill it, he thinks I'm level like 41 or something. He doesn't know how powerful I really am.
Okay, that might be more of a you problem at that point than the game's problem.
If the game let me do it, like I just exploited the experience mechanics in the game to get to level 64.
Being over-leveled in a game is not a new problem.
No, I'm not blaming the game for that, but like I'm not saying that like the argument I'm making is that I probably enjoyed this section more because I was over-leveled, so I didn't have to deal with anything in it. I could just move through it. Like, reading a lot of people's accounts online of like some of their experiences with that section, like if you do try to engage with the stealth, it sounds fucking awful. Like,
I did it a couple times and it worked fine, and then you move on. And I appreciate the different ways that the game changes things up, and I found this an interesting change up enough, specifically because I think the drabness and the sort of repetition of it is thematically relevant to that part of the game and what you're doing. And
sure, like obviously, like me not being into the story at this point means that like that doesn't have a huge amount of impact on you, but yeah, like I did not like the gameplay sections of Chapter 13, but then this is also where the Ravis stuff really comes up of you drop down this hole and his body is there and they executed him and buried him with his diary because there's 3 pieces of paper on the ground right next to him that like feel like another sort of element of like patchwork narrative because there's no point in the game where they ever do something like that. Like you have some of the books and newspapers that you can read, but like that's so weirdly direct. And that's like another thing that is one of the other things that they've talked about in patching the game. And like I don't want to make this about like them like talking about them patching the game, but it is another one of like the weirdly conspicuous things of like we are going to address that, or at least we're going to make it clear why he's there because like that information is buried there in the game, but it's like it is so buried that like when it comes up in a main plot thing, like even when I knew that he had been executed, I was still like, oh, that's weird, because I was kind of expecting this like, oh, he was executed, but maybe he escaped with his life and he'll like talk to you or something. But
no, there should be a cutscene explaining that stuff. I agree. I mean,
because that's just one of the elements that adds to the Chapter 13-ness of it, of just like, what? Like, why is he dead here? Like, what is going on here with the story? But so, anyways, let's cut to the end of the chapter where you go through all the stuff, and then you get Prompto back, and this is what the story thinks I really want to talk about. What the fuck were they trying to do with Prompto saying that he's from Niflheim? This is also a severe issue with the dub, where the dub implies that he is a whatever they call him, Madohe, the magic trooper.
Right.
The dub implies that he's one of those. In Japanese, all they say is that he's from Niflheim.
Yes,
he's
that's
Niflheim
important. Yeah.
So why is that important? Why that was one of the most inexplicable, just okay moments in the entire plot to me.
I mean, it's, I think definitely there needed to be more of that. It's kind of a drive-by thing where they do that, and then you feel like maybe they're going to do more with it, and they don't. It's it's a heightening and a next step of his whole feeling of alienation from these people, that he's not actually Lucian, and he's been passing that off. And so, from a plot standpoint, it's because he has this power that
he can open the door.
He can open the door, and Arden and the other Empire people would not have expected Noctis and his team to have that power, right? Because they thought they were all from Lucius. So, but it turns out he was like an immigrant to Lucius, and so they have that. And it's not necessarily like it creates a plot hole or anything. It's just this thing that comes in. It's just
weirdly distracting and feels... Because it never comes up again.
It never comes up again. There's a nice moment where they try to explain, well, we don't care, and it kind of ties that up. What it needed to be is there had to be some kind of establishing scene where it's like, Prompto has a secret, and he doesn't want to tell Noctis this.
And maybe Noctis and the other guys, maybe them saying something that made him feel like, oh, I can't tell them. Because it's something where it's like, if you play, or if you've watched Brotherhood, and also if you've got the motel scene with Prompto earlier in the game, Noctis has basically known him since they were in elementary school. Why would he give a fuck that this dude is from quote-unquote Niflheim when he's grown up his entire life in Lucis? It just felt like and I thought for a second that maybe this is going to Gladiolus was going to be from Niflheim or something, because they have that weird sequence that now we know is just a hook in for DLC of him leaving your party and coming back with a scar. I kept on waiting for that to be he's a secret agent or something, and this is going to come back around. But we know specifically that Noctis has known Prompto for most of his life. It's of course he doesn't give a shit. That would be if the two kids who grew up together their whole lives in America, in the 40s, and then one of them was hey man, I got some, or it would be in Saving Private Ryan. You have the church scene with Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks is sitting there, and I've got something to tell you guys. My mom was born in Germany. It's yeah. That doesn't mean you're a Nazi. No fucking shit. Fine. Yeah. You're biologically, you're from this region. You lived your whole life with us. Who gives a shit? There's no reason for them to be prejudiced against them. The game never gives you a reason to think that they would be.
Yeah. It's a small moment. It didn't detract from things, but it didn't add anything either. So it's kind of
although it's it's just one of those things where if for me the plot and all that stuff was already not working, those small things that are just what is going on, those have a cumulative impact that was really kicking me out of the story,
Okay. So then we get to the final scenes in Chapter 13 where it's pretty dramatic what happens, where all the monsters come in and you're fighting, but you can't beat them. So your friends tell you have to go on to the crystal.
I could have beaten them.
Okay.
Just want to point that out.
You get the point. Anyway. So what was I saying? So you go on to try to get to the crystal. You get there. It's a pretty, again, this is, I think, a point where I liked that we're getting back to the breathless pace. You get to the crystal, and then I think there's a pretty interesting scene. I like the whole scene with Bahamut and the revelation of what Noctis's real purpose is, and kind of tying up together a lot of this lore. This is also where Arden's actual identity is revealed, that he was the first king of Lucis, and is sort of, I don't know if they say he's directly in Noctis is one of his descendants, but the whole idea that he was the king who sort of took the dark path and brought all the demons into himself, and he is the one controlling all of this. He's immortal, and so then Noctis is brought into the crystal to basically be trained and transformed in this way, and that's where we wind up getting afterwards the 10-year time jump. But that was another sequence that I found very powerful, and I liked certainly on an aesthetic level, and I thought on a narrative level was a good moment of payoff. And I think the specific revelation of what Noctis has to do to be the true king was interesting, because that's a thing that we're building up the whole game of reclaiming your throne, being the king of kings, or however they translate that, however you want to say that. And specifically, it is about that return sacrifice. I liked that a lot. And I thought that was, and I think the way, I think there's the character animation in this game is just so good.
Yeah.
And some of those moments where this usually I think Noctis is really driven by that vocal performance because I think it's great, but that's actually a scene where he's mostly silent, and as it dawns on him, and again the weight of this is, and then we talked about this last week. The thing that makes Noctis interesting is he's a kid, and so you have, and this is why I find a lot of these parts, including Chapter 13, interesting, is that weight that is put on him, and he is not always. He cannot always deal with it fully, but the thing that makes him heroic in this game is that he tries and he keeps moving forward. And we get to this point where he learns what his fate is going to be and kind of quietly accepts it there. I found that all very interesting. And then the way it kind of throws that curveball where he's sucked into the crystal and then we kind of cut to black and the chapter ends and you're kind of wondering what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm fine with all the Bahamut stuff. Like, I think, it's a bit like it was some of the stuff in this section of the game with the Final Fantasy-ness of it is like, okay, yeah, like this is where the god, if you have like this long like bit of exposition where he tells you all this stuff. I didn't have much of an issue with it. I didn't love the Arden reveal that much just because I felt like it's not set up by anything. Like you never hear anything earlier in the game about like a legend of the first king of Lucis who made a pact with demons or something. Like it just feels like it's such a just like, oh, and by the way. Like obviously, my theory the whole time was that he was like the sixth god that we hadn't met yet, but then that's Ifrit, so I was on like kind of half right with that guess. But like this just sort of like, oh yeah, and I am like this thing and this thing and this is why I'm mortal and demons and blah blah blah. It's just like, yeah, like you can just tell us all of that, but it's one of those like you need to have set it up in some way and like give me some context for it to feel impactful because it's all just kind of like made up bullshit for the plot.
I guess so. That's. Yeah, I mean, it worked for me on the level of you're going through the whole game wondering what he is and what his motivations are, and it felt organic to that in so much as it made sense as a motivation for him and who he is. It didn't... I mean, I agree there's with a lot of things in this story, there are things they could have done to seed more of it and set it up, but I don't feel like it comes out of left field in a way that makes me feel like I wasn't watching that character.
It doesn't make it come out of left field, it doesn't have a lot of narrative impact, and it just felt like a really sort of cliche JRPG anime kind of like, of course you are the immortal king from the beginning of the kingdom who has also made a pact with the demons, like who wants to defeat Noctis when he has the power of the crystal. So that's why like it's just like it's such a like it's like his motivations and his identity are so completely unrelatable in any way that just like it just came across as like generic cliche Final Fantasy villain to me.
Okay. So, chapter 14?
Yes, chapter 14.
So we start, this is actually I think a really nice touch that Noctis, he's been asleep for a long time. You don't know how long, for a little while. But he wakes up basically in this like little island prison. And I love that it's the island you see off the coast of Golden Quay.
Yeah.
And if you've played the game for a good amount of time, you've seen that a ton.
And just been like, what the fuck is that weird looking big rock thing out there?
Right. And it's one of a number of things I really love in the design of the world, where you have these things in the distance and you're like, what is that? And you do actually, either you can go directly explore it or it becomes part of the story in that way. Like those things don't feel like they're there at random, which is something I really liked about the open world. Like a lot of the most like outrageous things about the design, like the whole disc and things like that, and the Rock of Ravito, all those things are not there just for show. They actually become parts of the game, and I like that. Yeah. So that's another touch here that I liked. He winds up taking his father's boat back. We're in this world of darkness. For a while, maybe you weren't because you were super powerful, but anyway, I was very overwhelmed, could not beat those demons with the
You hit a point where it's like they were throwing like level 70, 80 demons at you, and it's like, okay.
So even for you?
Yeah.
So anyway, so there's a lot of demons that you can't kill, and you're just trying to get as far as you can. For a while, I thought they were going to make you walk all 3 miles, which they don't. I think that's actually an effective turnaround that the kid winds up coming up. The kid that you had met a bunch of times.
Talcott.
Who's now an adult, and he's got his truck, and he kind of fills you in on things and brings you back, and that's where you meet your buds again, and they've been out hunting monsters for these 10 years. And then it's off to finish the game. Yeah,
this is the section to me the most that felt like there was going to be more here fleshing out this that like because they so put you like on rails, get you like put you in this car with Talcott, get you up to Hammerhead, and then like you have like the immediate little tiny like Hammerhead rest area to walk around in, and then that's it. And it just felt like, they talk about like, oh, Sydney is in this world and Sid is here and Iris is like doing all this stuff and organizing these hunters. And I was just like the whole time I was like, oh, this is like going to be really cool because I'm going to get to see like like maybe get to do some like side quests and like in this like upside down version of the open world, so to speak, or like the it's like going to the future in Ocarina of Time or something. Like I was expecting something quite on that scale, but I was like, okay, like I want to go to meet Dave with his dog and Frog Lady and the like weird reporter dude. Like I want to go like see like the woman who works like the power plant at the city. Like I want to meet all these people and like see what this world has become and like give you that sense of like now I have to actually step up to be the king. Like as a king is one of the things I don't love about this story is it does the thing where it's like the king is not a political figure. He's like this weird sort of like abstract concept where it's like Noctis never becomes a king. He never rules over anything. He never like has political power or authority. He doesn't have to make those decisions. He's like a symbolic sacrificial king. I kind of wish you would have had this moment because there's a great opportunity here to like be in your kingdom with your people and like be a symbol to them and come up to them and be like, okay, I'll go in there and like kill these demons and get the power plant on. And it's like, okay, like I'll figure out like Frog Lady is doing research on how to like defeat the demons because you find some pieces of paper where they're like doing scientific research, but they never specifically say it's Frog Lady, but it's like, okay, like that would be, there's so many opportunities here to do really cool stuff that would have made that section of the game really impactful to me that it's just like felt like they box you off so tightly because it's like so clear that like they didn't build anything out, and it's almost kind of frustrating that they tell you all these things that's cool that's going on in the world of like Sydney and all that stuff, and you don't get to actually see it and interact with it and like have it impact you directly in any way.
It's tough. This is a part where I'm conflicted because I don't know how much I wanted them to slow down because I feel like I don't know. I don't know if I wanted a full like open world part.
Sure,
here.
yeah.
But yeah, I wanted more. I think specifically what I wanted more of at this point, and I think you wind up getting it by the end once you're back in Insomnia and some of the stuff that happens there. But with the three friends, and in fact they have the scene. They choose to play it in the middle of the credits.
Yeah.
And I don't know 100% how I feel about that choice because I think it's a powerful scene and I do understand thematically why they chose to play it there. I think I would have kind of liked if they had played that scene right, like when they do the camping, like when it actually happens chronologically in the story, because I think it would have been good to have a little bit more of that. Because I understand that he comes back and he's the king. It's like, all right, we're going to go finish this shit. I do understand that. But this is also a game that did not necessarily value urgency all that much when you were in Lucius before. So yes, I could totally see also having... again, I don't think it would work to have the full like open world back or something like that, but at least certain things you could
like
go
at
do
least
to...
go to that city, like have a couple of missions or something, or like even if there aren't missions, like do the like this is actually like it's like a weird thing they do in the post game, but you have that like the mission that introduces the giant mountain monster or whatever that like brings all the side quest characters together. That's like they're not much of characters, but you do get more of like get a sense of who they are kind of by doing the fetch quests over and over and over again. And it's like even if I like very kind of begrudgingly accepted their side quests, whether begrudging or not, like I built up a rapport with some of those characters and I identified with some of them. It's like, okay, like I know what Dave looks like. I know Frog Lady. Like I know Weird Power Plant Lady. Like I like these people.
It is mostly relegated to Talcott telling you about it.
Yeah. Although the one detail I do really like, this is like something that only if you did this, and since I did so much of the side quest stuff I did, is I'm not even sure if it's a full-on side quest or it's just something they tell you can do, but Talcott is like assembling a collection of Cactuar figures, and you can give him your Cactuar figures, and when you're riding in his car, when you go first person, all of his Cactuar figures are on the dash of the car.
Yeah, it's
a really nice touch. I like that a lot.
I like that.
And that's like the kind of thing I wanted more of, specifically because I had spent so much time in the open world before going to the end of the game that like I think that would have legitimately had a lot of impact on me of like actually leveraging that time I had spent in the open world of like, hey, since you did all these quests, like you deserve to know what has happened to these people in this world and what they're doing and how you have changed their lives. It felt like a huge hole in like what the story wanted to be about thematically and like having that journey you took through that open world really like matter in a direct way and have that come back up. Like even just something small would have meant a lot to me.
I agree on that. I mean, I think, to me, Chapter 14 works outstanding in terms of wrapping up Noctis and the relationship with his friends and that stuff. And I think it honors that side of it very well. I agree that the larger scope of the open world, you want that there. It's sort of like a difference, and this is not a direct comparison by any means, but when you think of like the Lord of the Rings theatrical cuts versus the extended cuts,
sure,
and how in the theatrical cuts it's about Frodo's journey, and that's the thing it zeroes in on, and that's kind of how they choose what they're going to keep and what they're going to cut. And in the extended cut, and I think why people respond to those versions better, is it widens that scope. So like, for instance, in the scene in Lothlorien, in the theatrical cut, you only see the gift that she gives to Frodo, which is the Evan Star. Not the Evan Star. She gives him the light. Aragorn has the Evan Star. Anyway. But
it is a fine mistake to make. I'm not going to blame you for calling it the Evan Star.
I'm not Stephen Colbert. I don't know all of this by heart. Oh, God, he had an interview with Martin Freeman.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet.
It's so funny because he brings up at one point that he's a fan of Tolkien, and Martin Freeman just is like, God, stop talking about it. It's very funny. Anyway.
That is my favorite thing. This is like a weird side thing, but my favorite thing about Stephen Colbert is when he just drops the most insane, hot fucking like Silmarillion bullshit of just like people can name like all the different like gods of Middle Earth and like all like all of like their like specific identities and how they changed and like what they represented. It's like, oh my god. Like, Stephen Colbert is the only man in the entire universe who has ever read the Silmarillion all the way through. No one else has ever done it. No one has ever managed. He fucking does it every Saturday, I'm sure.
He didn't just read it, he memorized it.
Exactly.
He can recite it. No. But what I was saying is in the extended cut of Fellowship of the Ring, you have that scene in Lothlorien where all 9 gifts are given to the members of the Fellowship.
Gimli gets his lock of hair. That's one of my favorite scenes in that whole movie.
Yes, so things like that. And so that's why it feels like a richer experience. So it's again... Obviously, The Lord of the Rings, in any form, tells a more coherent story than Final Fantasy XV. But what I was saying is that it does feel to me like, from my experience, I feel like the main through line with Noctis, Gladiolus, Ignis, Prompto, and what goes from beginning to end with them, that affected me emotionally and worked me over there. There's a lot of stuff on the sides with lore and different pieces of characters and some of the open world stuff that I wish was built out more. Kind of in that same sense of like, that's what you miss if you go back and watch The Lord of the Rings in its theatrical form. It's like, it works. I get the story and I get the Frodo's through line, but I don't get Gimli and Legolas and their friendship or something like that. So that's where I come down on that. I do, because I think it's a cool idea. I like the design of the world at the end when it's dark, and mostly it is about the ruined city of Insomnia. And yes, they could have leveraged more of the actual world you spent time in.
Yeah, because also there's just so many good ideas. It's such a rich opportunity because it's like having to live in the world that is all night, because they have been building that up a little bit through the story of like, oh, the night's getting longer and all that kind of stuff. And
it literally gets longer as you play.
Yeah, both mechanically and just like sort of narratively they address it. And then in the future world you go to, it is night all the time. It's like, or like they tell you it is night all the time. And that's one of the things that's frustrating about it, is that there are parts of the game where the gameplay mechanics are so strong of like in unique things about the cooking and the photography and all that stuff. And some of those things, like the cooking and the photography, they pay off on really well through the narrative. And some of those things that they are set up so well of like basic things about the day-night cycle and that kind of stuff is just like, there are opportunities that you could have used that so well, and like missing them just it sucks, because again, like I have been dissing on this game a lot because I don't like the story stuff, but like a lot of this game I really love in the gameplay side of it and the open world side of it, and it's like there's so much rich material for them to work off of in the setting and the game mechanics. It's like not making full use of that feels like a tragedy to me in some places of like it could have been so much better.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, I was going to say something about that. You were talking about... Anyway, I forgot. We can move on.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we're moving on. So we get the friends come together. They have one last camp out, so you can do your last cooking if you want to do that. Get a final buff.
I think I made the thing because I had enough stuff for it, because I did that berry quest. I made Noctis's food that Ignis... is only important if you fucking play Brotherhood to you, but Ignis has been trying to make this dessert that Noctis had when he was a kid.
Oh, I didn't know that was in the game. That's kind of cool.
That is the berry quest. I don't know how you trigger to get it. I don't know if you have to do something special, but the woman at Golden Quake...
Yeah, I have it, yeah.
To get that berry, you have to do the carrot garden thing at the base by the lighthouse, and then there's a merchant that comes, and if you give him some carrots, he'll give you a berry, and then you go back to the lady, and that's the payoff on a thing that is in the spin-off anime of this video game.
I don't mind something like that as much because that's a side quest.
But but I mean, since they bring it up and they like directly address it in the game when he eats it, it's just like you never talked about it in the video game. Someone slipped up and forgot to mention that at somewhere like when you started the quest or something because it's like it's not a big deal, but it's a weird sort of larger issue with like the game's use of sort of spin-off material to sort of supplement or replace them doing like narrative work in the actual game. But that was a fun, again, like to talk about like using the mechanics of the game effectively to tell story stuff and like character stuff is like I was able to express that through my play of being like I had this ingredient and I have not actually made it. I only got the recipe. I'm going to make it on my last night, and it gives you, I forget what it gives you actually like some like weird like magic thing that is not actually a super useful ability.
Yeah. I made I think it was the toad steak pot stickers, which I made a lot because I had a lot of that, and they gave you pretty good boosts. It was like level 10 on HP, magic, and stamina or something.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Like my thing, I think it was like it reduced your attack damage but increased your magic damage, which is like. That's not super helpful, so I actually had to like kind of stand around it and wait for it to deplete. And I was like, okay, now I can actually go fight this boss.
No, mine was helpful. But anyway, so you have that moment, and they change into their Kingsglaive attire, their Kingsguard attire. And I really liked that as a touch, because I think, just like, you know, they're getting back to the city, it's been a long fucking journey to get there, and now they put on the clothes, and they look badass, and I liked that.
Yeah, that's another area where it's like, you know, it's not an issue for us, because we did watch Kingsglaive, but like, if you did not watch Kingsglaive, you have spent no time in that city at all, you know? So it's like, there's something weird about that, like, coming home effect exists only for, like, you having watched the movie and knowing what the city is like, and then, like, in the game, it doesn't deliver that sort of organically.
Yeah. I really do. I've been thinking about this, how you could improve that aspect of it, of, like, the basis of things with Insomnia.
Yeah.
And I do understand their reasoning in deciding we're just going to start you off in the open world. I mean, it is such a powerful opening to have them push.
It is a really good opening.
You know, so it's like, how else do you want to do that? Maybe it's an insert flashback kind of thing of, and I also understand why they want Noctis out in the world when Insomnia falls. There is certain narrative sense to that. I do think their initial instinct that is in that initial trailer, if you go back and watch it from 4 years ago now, of that the game would start in Insomnia and you would be there for the fall and then have to leave. That would obviously change and recolor a lot of the open world stuff, although then maybe you could more directly address of like something like, well, it's fallen, but what else are we going to do? We're going to have to live out here on the lam for a while. You could do something like that. I do think if there was some gameplay thing where you are in Insomnia at the beginning, then you go open world, then we take the open world away again, and we're back in the linear stuff, that bookend effect might work stronger. But then again, I love the opening of this game, so I don't know what to say.
I think, for me, in my mind, like the answer to that is just to have a protracted, more elaborate opening where you start the way the game starts, but then it's like a little bit more directed. That forces you that like when you stop at a motel or something, like it forces you to do a playable flashback sequence of Noctis at home. Like, and maybe that's how they tutorialize some stuff in the game, because that's another weird part of the game is that they don't. Like, the tutorial exists outside the, like, diegetic universe of the game.
And I never played that. I felt
I played, like, the first 2 minutes of it and was like, oh, wait, no, I know how to play this game. Like, I'm not going to do this.
Okay, yeah. Because I thought the initial missions gave it to you well enough.
Sure, yeah. It's, like, I think, like, in my mind, that would work well as, an opening that would get across the story stuff you need.
I agree.
Like, both the exposition and the sense of, like, Noctis's identity as, like, an urban... Like, as someone who was raised in an urban environment, that I think is very important to a lot of the stuff the open world deals with Noctis and his crew being these urban boys, these city boys that are now out into the country. And, like, since the game never really establishes directly what city life is like in this universe, it's sort of that can get a little muddy. I just think, like, having some amount of time spent in Insomnia while it was still there at the beginning would have done a lot to sort of, like, shore up some of the thematic holes that the game has.
No, totally, because that is, to me, story-wise, the weakest part is those holes near the beginning that I have because I watched the movie and the anime, but I wish they were in the game in some way. And I think that's actually a good idea of, like, if at different junctures, it just sent you back. And they could even recreate some of the Brotherhood stuff that way, where, like, the training could be with Gladiolus, which does the Gladiolus episode. The training for cooking could be something with Ignis. Something with Prompto would, you know, prompt all of that. And things like, you know,
prompt all of it.
I didn't mean to say that.
I did it earlier in the podcast, too. It's very easy to do.
Yeah. Anyway, so, yeah, I think they could have done some of those things. But, yeah. So, anyway, the final stuff in Insomnia is you're there. Jesus Christ, the music in this section is
very
unbelievable.
Good. Yeah.
and you have to go through. You fight some enemies. There's a really tough enemy early on, which I actually think is the toughest boss in the main story.
Yeah, even like me being over leveled, I forget. Like it's like I think it's a behemoth or something. But
Yes.
it's like it's in there, and it's just an enemy walking around in like the world, and you're just like, holy shit, this thing is fucking hard. Like it's the for me, it was definitely the hardest enemy in that sequence of the game.
Absolutely, and I actually think I like how they did that though, where like when it's over, like you have this like breathing room, and then the characters are commenting on like, God, I haven't done that in a while, or something like that. Like that was tough, but we're getting back into it, and I actually think that's maybe maybe it didn't need to be that hard, but I think throwing that at you right away was kind of an interesting thing to raise the stakes for that section.
Yeah.
Then you have the big Ifrit fight, which actually ties back to that first like flash forward that's at the beginning of the game.
Right, yeah. That's where the game meets where it started.
Yeah, and you learn that Ifrit has specifically been working for Arden, and so this is where you meet the sixth god, and you have that big fight, which is also technically just amazing, and I really liked that section. I think it's an interesting boss fight. Was
that boss fight like mechanically difficult for you? Because like I breezed through it, but I couldn't tell if that was because it was an easy fight or I was just so over leveled.
I think you were definitely over-leveled. Because
I was definitely over-leveled, but like...
I was trying to say, I think that had an effect.
Okay,
because I didn't find it like... Look, I actually have never died in combat in this game. I never encountered a game over screen, so the only game over screens I had were with the flying regalia.
Yeah, me too. And even that one was like, I parked and I was like kind of off the road, and it hit game screen. I'm like, game over screen, I'm like, what? Like, you could just... fucking get on back on the road. It's fine. When the fucking game over? Like, I didn't crash into a ball of fire, which I know you can do.
I did that the first time, definitely. Anyway, but yeah, so it's not the hardest thing, but I mean, I found I had to be using strategy. I had to be using my items judiciously. The only thing, I wish they had one more part where you could buy items, because I was out of items by the end of the Ifrit fight.
After the Ifrit fight, yeah. Because you can buy them when you're at Hammerhead.
Yes.
Sure.
But I thought I bought what I needed, but then the Ifrit fight was harder than I thought. So I did have to go back in time really briefly and just buy shit and then go back, which actually to me was like unplanned, but a beautiful little moment of seeing old Lucius again. But I wasn't going there to like play a bunch of stuff, and then I was back for the final fight. There was something about that like worked very well for me thematically, even though I was just doing that. Like that was not a canon piece of the story to me. That was just me buying items for the fight with Arden at the end, which you don't really need, because that fight it's not automatic or anything, but it's specifically not like a super tough. Like Ifrit is the final boss in terms of like challenge. So yeah, I think you were probably over leveled if you found it a complete breeze, because it took me a while and I definitely had to be on my toes, but it wasn't like that one with like the thing right before it where I was like, oh fuck, I actually have to rethink how I'm playing this game.
Yeah. I do want to elaborate. Like, me saying that fight was a breeze is not me saying that I didn't enjoy it. Like I said earlier, my favorite part about this combat is when I am way overpowered for a fight, and it's just like I just decimate stuff, because I find the very difficult fights in this game, they rely way too much on you having to stop and be like, okay, like use a high elixir on Prompto, and like there's like the pacing of fights is really weird when there's a lot of status effects and you have to go into your item menu a lot, and I don't really like that much. But I do really like just like the big, flashy, ridiculous, like, oh, I'm fighting this massive fucking thing and I'm just like darting all over the place and throwing magic fireballs at his ass, and like fucking Prompto is shooting all this shit, and then Gladiolus is doing like this double somersault and hitting him with this giant sword. Like, that stuff is fucking awesome.
I love that stuff, and I think the Ifrit fight is just amazing on that level. There's, especially being like in the center of Insomnia, the throne room is right beyond. You're near the capital. One of the warp points is even like at the top of the Capitol building, and then you can come back down. It is flashy as hell. It feels like a really great climax to the game. And then everything past that, I really love too, with you getting into the throne room, and you have that fight you have that encounter with Arden. He knocks out your friends, and so it's just going to be one-on-one, and I like how that whole fight progresses. So yeah, I don't know how, probably want to dive into the ending. I found this whole section of the game really overwhelming, and the thing that did it for me, where I was kind of surprised by how hard this hit me, was when you're about to walk in and confront Arden, Noctis turns around and says, Prompto, do you still have our photos? And he says, I do. And so you look through and you see your whole journey, and you can pick one photo out, which has a very specific use later on. And that hit me really hard. Like, that's one of those moments when I say, when I think this game is on, it is so on. And for me, it worked me over so much, because I think the way that comes back, and you see your whole, photo line and your whole timeline of the game back from the beginning to now, and you're thinking about, everything you've done, that is one of those moments where it clicked for me, where there are absolutely problems along the way. There are things that don't work structurally and narratively and gameplay-wise once in a while, or not once in a while, but frequently. But when I got to that point, it just clicked. There's things about like the specific structure of having that open world and that being this space of like nostalgia, where there is some light plot stuff going on, but overall that is still you and your friends out on your road trip trying to figure out what to do, but it is kind of these halcyon days, and then it moves on, and you've gone to these low points, and now you've gone through those 10 years in the crystal, and you're back, but that friendship you had is ultimately the thing that brought you to that point. And beyond any narrative things, to me, the gameplay foundation with all of that is so strong and so encourages you to have a connection to those characters that is so much, in the eye of the beholder, it is what you make of it, that when it asks you to do that again at that moment and remember whatever your personal relationship with that game was up until now, I found that really powerful and clever. And if this is not the game that has used that idea, or if this game did not use that idea perfectly, I really am excited to see the open world games that are influenced by this and maybe can build on that and say, we could have an open world game that goes off and does something else at the end and uses that structure in a way that is different, because I absolutely think this game uses its structure in a way that is so different than anything I've ever played. And I know it didn't work for you, but it did work for me. And, I do look forward to whatever game in the future is influenced and uses it even better, because I found that really overwhelmingly powerful at the end.
Yeah, like I said, my favorite part about the game is the open world and, like, the mechanics and those specific weird mechanics they build out. And, I felt like you see that picture mechanic and okay, I know what you're going to do with this at some point, but yeah, it is a very effective moment. The thing that, is frustrating about it to me is that, it's so clearly divided, okay, yeah, that, for me, the good part of the game, and then the, frustrating part of the game of, the main story stuff, and it kind of highlighted, how much of a weird distinction there is there of, so much happens in such a compressed time scale in the plot once you leave the open world, and, that's, you don't have any pictures from that time. There's, something weird about, here's actually another trick they miss is Prompto doesn't have any pictures from after Noxus left. There's some stuff like that of that I feel like there's something weird about that made me feel like the open world part of the game existed in another world. It's just it's so far away and feels so disconnected from the actual plot of this of the story of this game that's I have this sort of emotional attachment to this game and my memories of playing this stuff and my enjoyment of this stuff, but it feels so diverse or divorced at this point from what is actually happening anymore. That it's I'm so far away from being I'm into these characters in the sense of I like them along with me and them joking around in the car. I kind of don't care about Gladio and Ignis and Prompto in the cutscenes of the game anymore, because to me it has lost the magic that it had earlier. And it's not just that it gets darker, it's that I think it loses its touch of having something in those characters that you can identify that is recognizable and that you can pull out, and they start just becoming plot things that exist in this world, and they don't have the character that anymore to them, or at least it felt to me that they used to have. And even when that moment worked effectively for me in a lot of ways, because it was this reminiscent moment of looking back on my nostalgia of these other sections of the game, but it also put in stark relief for me how dissatisfied I was by everything I had played basically that day and the day before of this linear section of the game that I just think they did not handle very well at all.
And I guess because that part of the game mostly worked for me, even if I have problems with parts of it, I think that sense of distance is powerful there, because it is this point of no return and this no going back of you are looking at something that is distinctly in the past, and these characters are never going back to it. You're going to in the post game, but that's a different thing. But specifically these characters, this is, Noctis is looking at that because he knows he's about to die.
Yeah.
And that, this is going to be it, and this is something that he's not going back to. And so I think that distance of feeling about how far we've come from that, that's why it worked for me.
Yeah, so. I think for me, more specifically, like how it affected me was like me feeling like, oh, the Noctis and the Prompto and the Gladio and Ignis in these pictures are not these people, because these are the people that existed in the gameplay. These are not the people that existed in the plot, because the plot was never this stuff. The plot of the game, like the actual events, the character dialogue, like all that stuff of like that revolved around all this. It's the main issue with them not making more of the like road trip part of the game sort of like more sort of like elaborately written and designed into the overall plot, is that when we get to this moment, for me, like those two things are not the same thing to me. Like all my time spent in the open world dealing with the main quests that are like demarcated and like are clearly different than everything else, like those felt like something totally different than everything else I was doing, because they were existed in this world of like the 6 gods and like all this like time pressure and Lunafrena and all this stuff. And then the open world stuff was me going around and like having my buddies joke around in the back of the car while I was listening to Final Fantasy soundtracks and going to go fish somewhere and like getting some random monster side quest to go do that. And those two things do not coexist together in any way that makes any fucking sense. It's like it's one of the things that's an issue with specifically the way this game handles it, that like tension of the main plot requires action to move forward, and that action is urgent. And the gameplay systems that are fun that you want to engage with rely on the fact that there is no urgency anymore, because you're having fun palling around with your bros and going on camping trips and stuff. And to me, like those two things just cannot coexist, and they never found a way to narratively co-opt those like the interesting game mechanics they had to actually wrap back into the story. It's like the main story was like leeching off of these interesting game mechanics they had, instead of like those two things sort of like blooming together and like creating something better, like the sum of its parts, or like the two individual pieces, whatever.
All right, I said my piece, so let's go ahead and move on.
What picture did you pick?
I picked a picture that was the 4 of us with our chocobos.
Okay. Yeah, I picked the one that feels like is the one you're kind of supposed to pick, is the one you pick of all of you guys before you leave to go to the LTC or whatever, and you have like Iris and all the people in the picture. That's the one I picked.
Yeah, I mean, I picked the one that I just felt like that was most representative of everything I did. And, you know, to me, I agree that there is some division between... I do wish the story found a better way to leverage the open world while you are in the open world part. But ultimately, all of that stuff did come together for me, especially in that space of memory and everything. So that one just felt like that was very poignant of like... Also, if you're saying like, what is a moment Noctis like treasures most at this point, like for me in that role-playing sense of like, it's what he wishes he could go back and do, which is him and his bros with the chocobos out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And that felt very powerful to me.
A part of me really wanted to just pick a picture of Aranea and like have that be like in my own weird fantasy version, is like Noctis has been in love with her the entire time because she has this really great voice, and like everyone like he sees him, everyone else sees him take that picture and they're like, what? Why are you like Prompto has all these stacks of them all happy together, like pictures of like Lunafrena and like all this stuff. Is like, that's what Noctis is like. What are you saying? Like, why did you take that one? Or it's like a picture of like Dave or something, like just like some totally random thing.
Hurley from Lost.
Yeah, Hurley from Lost.
I thought you were going to say one of Prompto's random battle photos where nothing makes sense.
Yeah, it's just like Noctis is sort of like upside down and like half outside of the frame, and then there's like a big goblin face in the front left of the frame that's obscuring everything.
Yeah. All right, so the final scenes, you fight Arden. I think it's a pretty cool fight the way that's done, because it's back into like you're in full Armiger mode, and it's like it feels like a satisfying battle between those two characters. And then when he is defeated, at least in body, there's a spirit defeat that's going to go later. I really love the final cutscenes in this game. I think when Noctis goes and like takes that throne, that felt to me very satisfying. Of like the end of this road, that's what it is. And I like symbolically how that's tied together. And the way, just like as he's sitting, you have kind of the ghost of his father off to the side. I think it's just stunningly directed. And then the way, he sits, and this is his duty, and the ring starts lighting up, and like he's struck by basically all of the weapons that you found, the different royal arms.
Yeah, like specifically, it's the ghosts of the kings from Kingsglaive. That is like, because it's that ring, that's another one of the weird parts where it's like you have, like, I had to, like, in the back of my head be like, right, if you did not watch Kingsglaive, some of this stuff would be like...
But I did watch Kingsglaive, so yeah, exactly, I agree it's not perfect, but that doesn't change the effect it had on me.
No.
So anyway, and then I think, so that whole scene is just really powerful. So much of this is, you cannot deny the effect Yoko Shimomura has on this game.
No, yeah.
And, you'd want to just keep that in the background. Like, the music in these sections is outstanding. And some of the visuals and the way that's directed. And then it moves into this spirit realm where he is dead, basically, at this point. You are there, Luna Freya is there, and Arden is there and has to be defeated. So all the 6 gods wind up being there, and the other kings, and Noctis kind of harnesses that power he has, and Luna Freya, it's just that callback to that moment where she's dying early on, in the Alticia section, and she says something to Arden and gives him this little power of light, and it's something he didn't expect, and it's the one moment where he's thrown off in the game.
Sure, yeah.
And I found that very interesting. The way that's called back of this power and her sacrifice was going to come back no matter what to him. And then they all dissolve, and the ring winds up dissolving, and then it cuts to black. You hear the dialogue from the beginning of the game as they're pushing the car, and it plays Stand By Me again, and that's the credits. I thought that was just a perfect way to end a very imperfect video game. So
sure,
I really loved that specific progression of images and everything building up to it. That hit me pretty hard.
Yeah, for me, it's it was just something where I could recognize how well made it was, but it had no particular emotional impact on me. It was just it was something where it's there's nothing sort of surprising about the ending. Not that it was going for something surprising, but it was just it just felt okay, it's Final Fantasy. I don't know, it's something where that story had devolved into Final Fantasy trope world so much that it was just it was not the game I had wanted it to be, and I'm fine with the ending. I think it is well made, but the fact that nothing was built up substantially to it for me meant that it had no real emotional impact. It was just kind of a well done sequence.
Okay. So we already talked about the scene mid-credits, which is where you kind of flash back and it's their last camping trip.
Yeah.
And if you've only heard that in English, you're doing yourself a disservice, I assume, because in Japanese, Noctis, his acting there is really good and very raw. But then
hey, you guys are the best.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. It's not you. I love you guys. Those are 2 different lines.
Yeah. Anyway, but then I also really like the note, the grace note of the post-credits scene, where you see light returning to the world, and that's kind of nice because you see the world being returned, and then you're through the ruined insomnia, although the light is returning, and it kind of goes up to the throne room, and the music it's playing there is this awesome new orchestration of the prelude, not the prelude, but the opening theme to the first ever Final Fantasy game.
1, yeah.
So it's the
theme that plays when you repair the bridge.
Yeah,
I really like that game a lot.
Yes, well, it's what starts the story off. Because Final Fantasy 1 sort of just starts you're there in the world, but then the real story starts when you repair the bridge, right? But it's playing this big, grand version of that. It goes up to the throne. They're throwing some kind of funeral for Noctis, and then it zooms in, and your picture is there that you picked. And then clearly we're
picture of Aranea, the true love of his life.
That would be a really awkward way to end the game. Given what happens in the scene, because what happens is then he picks it up, and he and Luna are on the chair here. And for some reason, I've seen people are confused about this scene. It's clearly it's a spirit kind of thing.
It's not. It's just that
they're not saying literally they came back to life or something.
Yeah.
So anyway,
it would be someone being really confused at the end of Return of the Jedi. It's why are Yoda and Obi-Wan and Darth Vader they all died? What is going on?
And anyway, so he picks up the picture, he shows it to Luna. Luna winds up taking the pose, and it's revealed that's the person who is in the logo for Final Fantasy 15. Which one thing, I don't like the American box art for this game. The Japanese box art is really good and has the full logo. The American art does not. It's got a reversible cover. Yeah. But it doesn't. A Final Fantasy game should have the actual fucking logo, because that's a thing. Everyone has that picture on it. And then Noctis gets added to the picture, which I think is a very interesting way to do that. And then if you ever launch the game again, that's the logo that is on the launch screen, which I think is cool. And that's how it brings you back to the beginning of the game with the launch screen and everything, and you can load a save from there or something. But I really liked that as a final grace note to end the game on.
Yeah. Again, it's well done, but if you didn't have the emotional attachment to the story that they were expecting, it doesn't do much for you. Because especially that was one where it was since I was really put off by the way they treated the Luna Freya character, and I was not invested in their relationship as characters, it just didn't have an impact for me.
Okay. So anyway, that's Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah.
I liked it.
I liked the game. I don't like the story.
Okay.
Again, I am so conflicted about so much stuff in this game. It's a frustrating thing for me.
Okay. Well, it worked for me, and it's a thing where I fell in love with this game really early, and I kind of had some frustrations early on, and I was surprised by how much the more I played, those kind of melted away. And even when I can recognize areas where I wish this game was better, just looking at it for what it is, it worked for me really, really powerfully. And I mean this sincerely. When this game was on for me, it hit me harder on just visual and aesthetic, and not always like literal narrative, but in terms of how the characters move through this world levels than anything else I've played this year. And I can say, Uncharted 4 clearly has a better story in terms of how it tells that story
Yes.
and cohesion and all of those things. But I don't know, there was just a grandiosity to parts of this. And clearly I respond to the Final Fantasy aesthetic more than you do.
Yeah,
You are not-
I was so hoping, all along, to when, Final Fantasy 15 was announced and it looked like the setting and stuff, that they were doing something different. I was so hoping that this game would break the trend of how they handle narrative in, post-6 Final Fantasies, and it did not do that. It is the same kind of story they're trying to tell, with the same kind of tropes and character devices and, exposition and all that kind of stuff that really puts me off.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it worked for me. So there you go.
They should have made a road trip game.
Well, they should have, and I don't, on some level, because yes, that would be more powerful, but it's also that's a really common thing in video games too, where sometimes you have a story you want to tell, you develop your gameplay mechanics around that, and something is in there that is clearly the most compelling part, but for whatever reason, that can't be the full game. That's also not a new problem that a game has had.
But it's still a problem with this game. And I feel like a lot of games have, video games have started to figure some of that stuff out a lot. That I think Witcher 3 is a fantastic example of a game that does not have that kind of issue in a genre that typically has that issue.
Sure. And it did. The road trip versus the story stuff did make both sides of it more powerful to me by the end, and I understand why.
Yeah,
they
for
did
me,
you.
they destroyed each other in some ways.
Okay.
No, not each other. The road trip side just sort of overpowered the main plot. It was just fuck you. I've let me get back to the post game. I want to get back in the open world and do stuff.
Well, speaking of the post game,
Yeah.
anything from the post game you want to talk about? Did you do the big platforming dungeon?
Is that the secret dungeon?
Yeah.
I know how to get to the secret dungeon, but I haven't done it yet because I got there and I was because I think I ran into a level 70 enemy and I had 1 million experience stocked up. I was I wonder if I have enough to get to level 99, and I almost did, and I did a little bit of grinding and got there, and then I stopped playing the game.
Nice. So yeah, you should do it. It's amazing.
Sure.
It's frustrating and stuff. I found that part, which is it's a secret dungeon that does not have enemies. I'm not going to spoil anything beyond that. It's basically platforming and puzzle solving in some weird way. It to me was a microcosm of the game, which is that it is wildly ambitious. It is audacious in how it does some things. It is very frustrating in how some things are achieved. But overall, I thought, at its high points in that dungeon, I've never played anything quite like it. And so that was a little microcosm. Although I say little, it's 6 hours long.
Oh, jeez.
It's really long, unless you know exactly what to do and where to go. I was up until 3 a.m. one morning playing that.
Damn.
Because I just didn't want to let it beat me. It's also gruelingly challenging. It is the hardest thing in this game because the controls were not made for platforming.
Okay, that sounds like so much fun.
Well, it depends. Some parts of it are affected by that more than others. This is a thing that sometimes games like this do, where you have a game made for some system, and then maybe we go off and we want to experiment with a different genre, and the experimentation is cool, but it was not built from the ground up for that.
Yeah.
So you might like it, you might not, but that's one thing I've seen people have very positive reception to, and I definitely shared some of that, even if by the time I went to sleep at 3 in the morning, I wanted to burn my house down because some of it was frustrating. But that's okay.
So did you have you done any of the not the secret dungeon, but the second level dungeon of not every but 8 of the dungeons of the game has a secret door in there somewhere that you need a key to get that unlocks basically another smaller dungeon. Have you done any of those?
I have done none of those.
Okay, because I haven't actually finished one, but I got the key, so I can go do that if I want to. Because it looks like a lot of those are the easiest one is level 55, because when you get the key you unlock a quest for all of them, and then the top level one is I think there's a couple of level 99 ones.
Yeah, None of that was for trophies, and I was kind of going for the trophies. So, like, I did the
Yeah.
turtle fight, the giant monster turtle.
Adamantoys. I think it's called.
Adamantoys. Did you do that yet?
No, I've like unlocked it, and I saw it was level 99, and I was like, well, I'm gonna bank all my experience and come back here later.
Yeah, unless you want to get the trophies, maybe don't do that. It took me 2 hours to beat that thing. It has 5 million hit points. And that's not an exaggeration. It has 5 million, and your maximum attack is 99.99.
Yeah.
So do the math. If you were just doing maximum attacks, which obviously you are not just doing maximum attacks, it takes a very long time, specifically because most of what you have to do there is warp strikes. My index finger on my right hand still hurts from that fight. That's one of the only times I have hurt myself playing a video game.
Jeez.
So, anyway, unless you want all the trophies, maybe don't do that one.
Yeah, I'm a little bit annoyed by how grindy some of the post-game stuff is, because, like, some of it is fun. Like, I like some of, like, the bosses that, like, because you can fight basically mini-boss enemies in some of the higher-level hunt stuff that we talked about a little bit earlier, and that's cool. But, like, getting to access to some of that stuff is a bit... sometimes kind of arbitrary in some ways and just a bit arduous because also like there's like a dungeon that is not a hidden secret dungeon, but it's a dungeon that is really hard to find that you need to do because it has one of the doors. It doesn't have a royal arms or anything in it. It's just this fucking random ass dungeon in the middle of nowhere that at some point I just looked up online where all the dungeons were because I could not figure out how come this fucking key thing was not unlocking for me.
I think I've done every dungeon in the game. I don't think I did. I didn't do like the second levels that you were talking about.
Well,
with the
if
doors,
you will know if you did all the dungeons and you saw all the doors because you will see there is a question, like a side quest that unlocks in the Hunter outpost that's up by like the Vesper Pool area.
Okay.
So if there's a question mark up there, that means you have done all the dungeons in the game other than the secret dungeon and seen all 8 of the doors.
I didn't go look at the doors, so I don't know if...
Because I don't know if you have to go up to all the doors and press X, because... Like, I think maybe you do, or maybe you just have to see all those doors. If you have to go up to all those doors and press X, you might be fucked. Because luckily, that did not have an issue for me, but when I was looking up how to unlock that stuff, because I was getting annoyed online, because I couldn't find this one fucking dungeon, it seemed like some people discovered this, like, oh, wait, you can't just clear the dungeon, you have to go see the door.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty annoying.
I really like the dungeons in this game. I want to say that. I think
some of them are okay. Some, like, I found some of the dungeons just get kind of obnoxious. Like the one that just got really fucking annoying it's the hardest one. The one that's under that tower, and you have to do the fucking...
Okay, that's the one I don't like. But
yeah.
I was saying, on the whole, I generally really found the dungeons interesting and compelling to go through and fun. Castlemark Tower is an annoying bitch, but other than that one, I generally found them very pleasurable to go through and interesting and varied and different, and I liked them. So
yeah, I like some of them I liked. Like, I didn't like that one. I didn't like the sewer one in particular. It was just annoying because some of the dungeons just have enemies in them that are annoying to fight. And it's one of my issues with the combat system in this game is that when the combat is fine, it's fine. But every once in a while, you'll have like flying enemies or enemies that have used too many status effects or enemies that just seem to have like a million fucking hit points. Even though, like, I just fought something. I'm level 99. I fought something that was like level 65 bullshit. And it was like, it took me like 10 fucking minutes to kill this one thing just because it had so much health. And like that stuff is really annoying because it's where... It feels like the JRPG roots that they're trying to call back to with some of the combat runs into conflict with the action-y nature of what the combat actually is, and it just ends up feeling like really grindy in ways that frustrate me. And that's that's something I'm running in a lot more in the post game than I did earlier on, because they throw these like more powerful enemies at you that just have ridiculous hit points and are just constantly casting confusion and shit on you that is just obnoxious.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm done. I've put the game back on my shelf. I will come back for some of the DLC because I've gotten the season pass and I'm excited to see some of that. But yeah, I think I wanted to just get all the trophies and I've done what I've done. I definitely started getting to the point, which happens in every single open world game if you play it enough, where you start to resent it. But yeah. I do feel like there's a point where that's a me problem because I got unhealthy in how much I was playing this game. And part of that is just I really, 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 really like it. But there's also a point where I really probably yesterday should have told myself the trophies aren't this important because I got pretty frustrated with some things. Not to a point where I started hating the game or anything, but just where I started feeling gross and dirty, which happens with some open world games when you get to that point of grindiness at the end. But Yeah, I've gotten all the trophies. I've put it back on my shelf, so I feel like I have done Final Fantasy 15 to the extent that I'm going to do it until maybe there's DLC and extra story stuff. So
yeah, I think I'm still going to bang my head against some of the post-game stuff just because, like, I feel like, again, that's the stuff I like in the game, and there's some stuff there. It is frustrating that it's like, it feels like there's some stuff in the post-game that I'm enjoying a lot, and then there's some stuff that is just like, oh, god damn it, why does this fight have to take fucking 10 minutes long? Like, I should be breezing through this. So, like, I will see how much. I'm not specifically going to get, like, or, like, aiming to get all the trophies, though. I think the only ones I need are like to level up all the like different skills, like to like get level 10 fishing and beat the adamantoids. I think that's kind of the only stuff I have left. So
yeah, probably you could do it. I mean, it's not that hard. The biggest thing in terms of trophies is something is wrong with survival. That trait that Gladiolus has. Have you leveled that up yet?
I think I have it at like level 9. I'm not sure.
Okay. It's really tough to do just through the stream of the game because it counts your steps is how that's done. And I'd looked this up because I was playing with that's the only thing that's not going up. And what is it's your steps. So unless you like never used the car or never used chocobos, you're never going to get that up. And everyone's solution was you rubber band the sticks together on the controllers and leave it and it'll do it. And I did have to do that. And I have never done something like that in a game. And that should tell you how much I liked this game that I was willing just for that last trophy to, I didn't even have a rubber band. I had to get like a hairnet and wrap it around the controller sticks. And it would be in Hammerhead is where you can do it best. And Noctis will just run in circles. And if you let that go for a few hours, you can get that to level up.
Nice.
So, yeah. It's also, you have your PS4 in an open-air environment. Yeah. I have mine in a cabinet, so it was like, it got hot when I was doing that. But it's okay, the PS4 can take it.
Hopefully.
No. It was fine. I mean,
there are limits.
I never left it on overnight, and I would recommend you not do that if you have a launch PS4, because the launch PS4, it runs hot. And loud, and I don't know if I completely trust it with that unless you have it in like a completely open air environment. You do not have to leave it overnight. People have been saying that. You can leave it for, like, I probably had to have that going for maybe 4 hours total, and I did it over a couple of times. So like, just like last night when I went to see that Voyage of Time movie, I rubber banded the controllers and I left, and when I came back, he'd gone from 8 to 9. Or actually 8 to 9.5, so it was okay. And then I did one more today where I did that for an hour, and then I just turned on my Xbox and played some Skyrim. And
and then you went because I was about to say the only game I've done that in is Skyrim, where a trick in Skyrim to get your sneak up to level 100 is to find a person who's sleeping, and there are some different areas in the game where characters are basically sleeping forever, and you go stand on them, go to sneak, and just rubber band into a wall, and eventually your sneak is 100. So you could have had that going on in Final Fantasy 15, loaded up Skyrim, done that, and then gone to like see your movie or whatever, and come back and be like, look at all I've got level 10 survival. I can sneak past anything in Skyrim. Like, I don't even have to play video games, and I'm great at them.
Yeah, I would expect they're going to patch the survival thing because, like, it is so out there. Like, everything else is reasonable. The cooking, the photography, and the fishing you have to do a little more, but the fishing is so hands-on.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's unreasonable how much fishing you have to do to get level 10.
I haven't done the last fishing quest yet to get, like, the super mega fish or whatever at the pier.
I never find that. Anyway, yeah.
I've just assumed that in the process of trying to get that, I will probably get my fishing up to level 10 because getting the gar or whatever that other fish is called to get to that point, that was so fucking annoying. And I got like from level fishing from like 2 to 5 just trying to fucking finish that one quest. It was like a thorn in my paw for so long.
It's really tough, but yeah. So anyway, what else? Anything else we want to say about Final Fantasy 15?
It's a weird game.
Yeah. It is a weird game.
It's a weird fucking game. I'm going to have a weird time putting my top 10 list together and like what to do with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I really loved this game, and I'm not sure where I'm going to put it, but I have some good ideas. I actually have at this point, because of Final Fantasy 15 feels like the missing piece on my top 10. I have a draft of my top 10 from 10 to 1, and I'm really happy with it. And I have at least 2 or 3 more games to play this year, and I'm like, fuck. Fuckity fuck. Unless nothing I play is worth that top 10 placement, which doesn't mean it's a bad game. I have some incredible cuts from my 10 right now in terms of, like, I can't believe I didn't find room for that, but there's only 10 titles, and I played, like, 40 games this year.
Yeah, so. I haven't, like, looked at it seriously to try to actually formulate the list. Like, every once in a while, I'll glance at it to, like, put on a game I played and be like, oh boy, and, like, kind of do the mental math in my head and be like, fuck. So, like, a lot of these games are not going to make it because there's more than 10 games on this, like, piece of paper.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think it's funny. You and I obviously played a lot of the same games this year because we talk about them on here. But I think we're going to have very different lists.
Yeah.
I know at least 3 games both you and I are going to have in prominent positions.
Sure, yeah, definitely.
But other than those, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fun one when we do that, and I'm not sure when we're going to do that, but I feel like now that this one's over, Final Fantasy 15, I don't think either of us have anything huge to play left.
Yeah, I'm going to play The Last Guardian, so
Okay.
I want to play that, and I want to play Thumper for sure.
Okay.
And those are the 2 that like I have my eyes on that I definitely want to play. There's obviously a couple of other games that I kind of want to play, but like I don't know if I'll have time to.
Let me know how you like The Last Guardian.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten that yet. I don't know if I'm going to play that because I just don't know if it's my kind of thing. But I'm going to play Infinite Warfare. I have that. I'm going to play Mario Run, which is a different kind of thing. I might play the Titanfall 2 campaign because I feel like that's 5 hours long. I can knock that out.
Yeah, you can definitely knock that out in a night or 2.
Yeah, we'll see. So almost done. We'll probably do that, at last week of this year, early, January, something like that. But that'll be a fun topic to do. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is like the most competitive year for games that we have done since we started this podcast. Like it is pretty insane.
And even something like Final Fantasy 15 is so interesting to me, where I really love it so much, and I know you love parts of it and have problems with parts of it. But that's even the kind of thing where, like, even if you think that's a messy game, that's like a fascinatingly messy game in a way that only 2016 could deliver, right?
Yeah. Like this is a year that like the defining trend of games for me of like looking at not like specifically like my games that I'm aiming for. Like these are probably my top 5 or. Like including Persona 5, which is not really part of the list, but like is part of this trend. It's like this is a year of games that like even if it's part of a long running franchise, like defies so many expectations from Hitman, Uncharted 4, Doom, Persona 5, like Final Fantasy 15, all these games. It's just like some of them have been in development for fucking ever. Some of them just came out of nowhere. But it's like these are games that just like I would have never expected this game to be the way it is. And whether for good or ill, like they are incredibly fascinating, and I'm sure are going to be immensely influential games in a number of different ways going forward. And that's one of the things that's most exciting about this year is that it's not just a bunch of good games; it's a bunch of games like Hitman that will like innovate an entire like business strategy for delivering video games, or it'll be like Uncharted 4 that like deconstructs its own genre and is like this weird, amazing example of AAA games that you don't ever really get.
Or whether you like how it all shook out, Final Fantasy 15 takes the JRPG to a new place.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm really curious to see what its impact is going to be going forward.
Yeah.
Because
fishing mini games and everything going forward.
But I'm serious. I mean, it is very much a JRPG. It keeps that part of its identity, but it is an evolution on that. And whether you think every part of that evolution is successful or not, I hope we can all recognize that ambition and that's a really interesting thing that deserves attention and study.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean,
in
very similar ways that Metal Gear Solid 5 did.
Sure. But, like, I look at my top 6 or something, and you're right. Every single one of those games is like something where it's like, this is a long-running genre, and this game blew it up.
Yeah.
In a way that I found fascinating. Like, it is kind of the through line. So I'm very excited. I'm going to say one more thing about Final Fantasy 15.
Okay.
Just for people on the podcast who are interested, I think this is a cool thing. The soundtrack is coming out at the end of December.
Great.
Which I'm excited for, because fuck that soundtrack.
Really good soundtrack.
Really good soundtrack. I had it on pre-order from Amazon Japan in just the normal CD version, which is about $40 if you convert the yen to dollars, although we're really powerful against the yen at the moment.
Yeah.
It's going to be great, because come January 20th, that's ending. Anyway, when we start our trade war. But anyway, so it's a good price. You can get it 4 CDs. They also have a Blu-ray version of the soundtrack. And at first I kind of ignored that, because that's something Square Enix does with a lot of their music, and I'm not even sure what to do with that. But the one they're doing for Final Fantasy 15 is pretty cool. So if you get the limited edition soundtrack, which is more expensive, it's like $80, but you get a Blu-ray with the entire soundtrack. So what you would get on those 4 CDs, everything there, plus a couple bonus tracks on a Blu-ray. So it's got in high-resolution audio, plus it's just got the MP3s on there. So if you have a Blu-ray drive, and that even includes things like the PS3. I don't know if the 4 can do it because its media things are different, but the PS3 can just take those MP3 files off for you.
Yeah.
It has that. It has another disc with every track that you can get for the car in the game.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's over 250 tracks, they're saying.
Jesus.
So I'm definitely getting that. I'm getting that limited edition because I fucking want that disc. And then it's got a third just a CD with piano arrangements of a bunch of songs. And Amazon Japan has a bonus with all the music from the different trailers for this game, which often had special soundtrack presentations by different groups like the Video Game Orchestra. So it's kind of pricey. My order comes out with shipping to about $90 US, but it's worth it to me. Like, for that kind of soundtrack, that's pretty fucking cool. And like, if you have a PS3 or something, my understanding is you can just pull those files off. And of course, if you have a PC with a Blu-ray drive, which my brother does, so I'm just going to probably have him rip them for me. But that's kind of cool. So,
and hey, if you also have the Final Fantasy X soundtrack, then you can get to Xanarkand on that too.
There, yeah. Like, I have a number of those, but I'm kind of excited to have that CD disc because the card disc, because there's a bunch of Final Fantasy soundtracks that I'm not as familiar with, and I don't own, and they're on there, so that's cool. But yeah. So anyway,
To Xanarkand isn't.
To Xanarkand is not.
God knows whatever reason. There's like an arrangement of it in one of the Dissidia soundtracks that was like, when I needed some To Xanarkand, I was like, okay, I'll fucking dig into the Dissidia soundtrack and find it.
But I love that they're putting that Blu-ray disc together because that's going to be an awesome compendium of, Final Fantasy has like the best soundtrack record in gaming in terms of the length it's been around and the number of soundtracks. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And hey, if nothing else, Final Fantasy 15 hopefully helped a lot of people realize that Final Fantasy 3 has some of the best music ever, and don't ignore it.
It's only bested by the Final Fantasy 1 soundtrack, which is the original and the undisputed champion, for me, of
there's
Final Fantasy.
There's not a lot of bad choices among the Uematsu soundtracks. They're pretty good. So anyway, that's it for this week. Not sure what we're going to be talking about next week. I'll have played Infinite Warfare, so we can go back on that one if we want.
Maybe I'll have played Last Guardian. I don't know how much time I'll have. That game is.
I'm so fascinated to play Infinite Warfare because, boy, is this narrative being written that game is like a massive failure critically and commercially and everything. And I feel like that's maybe not the case, given what you and other people have told me about it.
I'm really excited for you to play that game because I want to talk about the story in depth because there's some stuff because just like almost more than anything because I think that story has been really sort of like underserved critically because people have just sort of brushed it off. It's Call of Duty and maybe I'm fucking crazy. Maybe I'm the only person that sees this. Maybe you'll be like, no, it's just a normal Call of Duty story, Sean. But I think it's really fucking good. I want to talk about it.
So that'll be next week, and we'll see you then.
Yeah, I look forward to reconvening 12 years from now when Final Fantasy 16 comes out.